Welcome back, my family. Before we dive into tonight's creepy little journey, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone who loves a good scare before bed. I would love to know where you are watching from and what time it is for you right now. So drop it down in the comments and hype me up a little on YouTube. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights, and let us step into tonight's story.
I have only told this story to a few people, and even then I kept it short. Not because it is embarrassing in a normal way, but because it makes me sound like the kind of person who hears patterns in static and sees faces in shadows. The kind of person you nod at politely and never call back. The problem is, it changed something physical in me. It changed how I hear quiet. I used to love quiet. Quiet meant a day was over. Quiet meant I did not have to talk, did not have to answer, did not have to fix anything. Now quiet feels like a held breath, like a room waiting for the moment it can move again. This happened outside St. Louis, in the kind of industrial sprawl where every road looks like it was built for trucks first and people second. I was 29, working in a warehouse that sat behind a line of big box stores and empty lots. The building ran on fluorescent lights and forklifts and a constant churn of pallets. In the summer, the air inside had this stubborn smell that never left. Cardboard dust, diesel from the loading bays, and sweat that dried on your shirt so many times, it stopped feeling like fabric. That day had been ordinary in the worst way. The kind of shift that did not explode into drama, it just dragged. My feet hurt from concrete. My hands had that gritty feeling you get from handling boxes all day. The back of my shirt was damp when I clocked out, and the front was already dry again from the AC blasting over the time clock, like it was trying to freeze the building into compliance. I remember the parking lot more clearly than the warehouse. The parking lot was lit too bright, too even. Tall poles with LED lights that made every car look pale. The asphalt gave off heat and a faint chemical tang, like rain had never really washed it clean. My car was parked far out because I had gotten there late, and I could hear the interstate in the distance. Not individual cars, not honks, just that steady hiss. A long, low sound, like the city exhaling through its teeth. My phone buzzed while I was unlocking the car. I looked at the screen, saw my wife's name, and felt my stomach tighten before I even answered. We had been in that phase of a relationship where every conversation was a ledger. Money, hours, who did what, who forgot what, who was tired, and who had the right to be tired. I took the call anyway, because that is what adults do when they are trying to be good. It started calm. It always starts calm. Then one sentence hit the wrong nerve. Mine, hers, it did not matter. The tone changed. The air changed. I was standing there under a light pole that made my shadow sharp on the ground, arguing into a rectangle of glass like my life depended on winning. I remember the way my voice sounded in my own ear, too loud in a quiet parking lot. I remember the way my jaw felt after, like I had been clenching it for an hour. At one point, she said, very flat, "So are you coming home or not?" I looked at my car door. I looked at the reflection in the window, my face lit white by the overhead lights, eyes tired, hair stuck down with sweat. I could picture our kitchen, the sink full, the little routine of pretending we were okay long enough to fall asleep. I could picture the silence afterward, not peaceful, not shared, just two people in the same space refusing to touch the same problem. I said something I regret, not a slur or a threat, just a small cruelty. A defensive thing meant to cut the conversation short. She went quiet on the line, and I could hear her breathing. That was worse than yelling. That was the moment I knew I had done damage I would have to pay for later. I did not want to go home like that. I did not want to walk into the house carrying that tone with me, like smoke on my clothes. I also did not want to sit in my car outside our place and stew until I made it worse. So I did something childish. I told myself it was practical. I told myself it was for everyone's good. I drove. The warehouse sat close enough to I-70 that you could be on the highway in minutes. I merged into traffic and let the road make choices for me. The sky was darkening into that deep Midwest summer blue, where the air still feels hot, but the light is already leaving. The radio played a talk show I did not listen to. The only thing I really registered was sound. The steady rush of other cars, the thump of expansion joints, the occasional roar of a semi passing close enough to rattle the inside of my door. I took the first exit that had a cluster of signs: fast food, gas, a hotel with the word sweets in it, which always feels like a lie. I was not rich. I was not on vacation. I was not traveling for business with a company card. I just wanted to disappear for one night, not vanish in a dramatic way, just not be reachable, not be in my own bed with my own responsibilities, looking at me from the corners of the room. The hotel sat back from the road behind a strip of grass and a shallow drainage ditch. The sign out front glowed in neon, a little too bright, and the word vacancy flickered like a nerve twitch. The parking lot was wet in patches from an earlier sprinkle, and the asphalt gave off that smell of warmed rainwater mixed with oil. Moths drifted around the lights in lazy, stupid circles, hitting the glass like they were trying to get inside the bulb. There was a pole near the far end of the lot, with a security camera mounted on it. The camera was pointed down at an angle that made sense, like it covered the front doors and the handicap spots. A little red light blinked on it, slow and steady. Watching, recording, promising something. I parked under a light that buzzed faintly, not loud enough to be annoying, just enough to register if you were tired. When I opened my car door, the air outside felt heavy and damp. The distant interstate noise was still there, a constant hiss. But closer now, I could hear smaller things too. A car alarm chirping somewhere far off, the soft rasp of my shoes on wet grit. I walked toward the entrance with my overnight bag slung over one shoulder. The bag smelled like the inside of my trunk. Faint rubber, old fast food wrappers. The kind of stale scent that clings to things that do not get aired out. I told myself I would shower, sleep, wake up early, and go home calmer. I told myself it would be a reset. The automatic doors slid open with a smooth, practiced sound. Cool air hit my face, carrying the smell of detergent and carpet shampoo. The lobby was lit in that bland hotel way, neither bright nor cozy, just evenly illuminated enough to make everything look clean even if it was not. A TV on the wall showed the news with captions on and no volume. A brochure rack stood by the wall like a display of fake options. Attractions, restaurants, maps no one actually used. The HVAC system had a steady drone, like a low engine running somewhere behind the walls. Every so often, from deeper inside the building, I heard a harsh clatter, ice dropping into an ice machine bin. It was an ugly sound, like someone dumping glass. The front desk was staffed by a young woman with her hair pulled back tight, name tag pinned on, smile ready. She asked how my night was going. I said fine. We both lied. She handed me a clipboard. I filled out the form, my handwriting sloppy from fatigue. She took my ID, ran my card, and the terminal beeped. The beep was normal, bright, forgettable. She slid a keycard across the counter in a little paper sleeve. Her fingers had long nails painted a pale color. She told me my room number and gave directions like she had said the same words 1,000 times. Second floor, middle of the hall. Quiet side. Quiet side, she said, and smiled like she was doing me a favor. I nodded like it mattered. Before I turned away, I glanced at the glass doors behind me. They reflected the lobby lights and the dark outside, and for a second, I caught my own image in them. Not a crisp mirror reflection, more like a ghost version. The glass doubled the world, my tired face hovering over the black parking lot, my outline layered over the blinking red camera light outside. It made me look like I was already inside and outside at the same time. I remember thinking, in a very ordinary way, that I looked older than I felt. Then I looked away, because why would you stare at yourself in a hotel door? Why would you give that moment any weight? I took my key card and walked toward the elevator, listening to the HVAC breathe and the ice machine clatter somewhere down the corridor. And I told myself I was making a small, harmless choice. I should not have stayed. 1. Check-in, comfort, and the first red flag. 1,050 words. The lobby was the kind of safe that only exists because people agree to act like it is safe. It smelled like fresh detergent trying to cover something older and damp. Not mold exactly. More like carpet that had been cleaned too many times and never truly dried. The air was cool from the HVAC, steady and even, and the sound of it filled the space the way background music would in a nicer place. The front doors slid open and shut with a soft, mechanical sigh every time someone came in. And each time they did, a little ribbon of warm summer air followed them inside before getting swallowed by the cold. A flat-screen TV hung in the corner above a faux wood cabinet. The news was on, but the volume was muted. Captions rolled silently under a talking anchor, and the only time you noticed the TV was when the screen shifted from a studio shot to footage of something burning or crashing, and the light changed on the wall. The captions made it feel even more distant, like the world's disasters had been turned into a decorative loop. There was a brochure stand by the window with glossy pamphlets that promised things no one was actually coming here for. Riverfront attractions, a museum, historic downtown, the kind of stuff you grab when you are pretending your trip has a purpose besides getting through one night. A cheap coffee station sat on a folding table under a sign that said complimentary, and the smell was bitter and thin, like it had been sitting on a warmer since afternoon. Next to it were little plastic cups stacked in a crooked tower, and the creamer packets were soft from being handled too much. The floor was tile near the desk, but it transitioned into carpet that looked almost gray under the lights, except it was not gray. It was the brown of old pennies and ground in dirt, patterned in a way that hid stains on purpose. Every step on it made no real noise. It swallowed sound, which should have been comforting, but that night it made everything feel slightly wrong, like the building preferred you not be heard. The woman at the front desk had her hair pulled back tight and a name tag pinned straight to her shirt. She looked tired in a way that was hard to place because she kept her smile on. It was not a warm smile. It was a trained one. The kind you can hold no matter what the customer says. Her nails were painted a pale color that looked chipped if you stared too long. "Checking in?" she asked, even though she could obviously see I was holding a bag and standing in front of her. "Yeah," I said. My voice sounded too loud in the quiet lobby. I hated that. I did not want to be noticeable. I did not want to be a story for someone behind a counter. She asked for my ID and my card. Her hands moved with this practiced speed, like the desk itself had taught her the choreography. The terminal beeped when she ran the payment, and the sound was sharp in the otherwise muffled space. As she typed, I watched the little security monitor on the counter to her left. It was angled so guests were not really meant to see it, but I was standing close enough that I could. 4 camera feeds, all in a grid: the parking lot, the front doors, a side hallway, the elevator area. At first it looked normal, grainy, slightly washed out, the way cheap cameras always look at night. But then I noticed the front door feed. The automatic doors were open on the screen, frozen mid-slide, like the camera had caught them at the exact wrong moment. A person walked through the frame, except the person did not move. The silhouette stayed in the same place for too long, like a paused video. Then the feed jumped, not in a smooth, streaming way. It snapped forward a second. The doors were closed again. The silhouette was gone. It could have been a refresh, a lag, a bad frame rate, plenty of normal explanations. Still, my eyes stayed on it. Something about the little hiccup made my stomach tighten. I did not like seeing a thing that was supposed to record reality behave like it was tired of reality. "You're on the second floor," she said, sliding a keycard across the counter in a paper sleeve with the hotel's logo on it. "Room's in the middle of the hall, quiet side." Quiet side. She said it like a perk, like a secret, like I should thank her. "Quiet side," I repeated, mostly to myself, and nodded. She smiled again, a little wider, and it made the hair on my arms lift for a second because it felt like the smile arrived a beat late, like she had to remember to do it. "Elevator's right there," she added, pointing with a finger that had a faint smudge of ink near the nail. "Ice machine is on your floor, down the hall." The way she said ice machine sounded automatic, like it was part of the script, but the word landed in my head because I had already heard that clattering sound from deeper inside the building. It was an ugly noise, not loud, but sudden, like dumping glass into a bin. I took the key card and my sleeve of paper, and as I turned away from the desk, I caught my reflection again in the glass doors. The lobby lights layered my face over the dark outside. The camera pole's red light blinked in the background like a slow heartbeat. The reflection looked less like a person and more like a smear on the glass. I walked to the elevator. The hallway leading to it was carpeted, and the sound got even quieter as soon as I stepped off the tile. The air felt stiller there, like the HVAC did not quite reach. The elevator doors were stainless steel with fingerprints that caught the light. Above them, a little speaker crackled softly and then went dead, like someone had tested it earlier and stopped. The elevator arrived with a small ding that sounded too cheerful. I stepped in alone. The mirror inside showed my bag strap cutting across my chest, sweat marks on my shirt, my eyes too awake for the hour. The doors slid shut, and for a second, the space felt sealed, quiet, private. Then the elevator moved, and I heard something shift in the wall. A faint metallic tick, just once. Second floor, ding. The hallway upstairs smelled different. More carpet, less detergent, a faint sweetness like air freshener that had been sprayed too long ago. The lighting was dimmer, the kind of soft yellow that makes everything look older than it is. The carpet swallowed my footsteps completely. I could have been floating. Somewhere down the hall, behind a door with a bright exit sign above it, I heard the ice machine dump a load. That same harsh clatter, fast and sharp, and then the softer, longer sound of cubes settling. It made me think of teeth. I walked toward my room number, middle of the hall, quiet side. The doors were identical, spaced evenly, each with a little peephole and a strip of brass. No decorations, no personality. Just rectangles that promised privacy because they were thick enough to block sound. I stopped at my door and looked at it for a second too long. Not because I was scared yet, more because I felt that weird hesitation you get when you are about to step into a space that is temporarily yours, like you are borrowing it. I slid the key card out of the sleeve. The plastic felt warmer than it should have, like it had been handled recently. I told myself that was normal. She had just given it to me. Of course it was warm. I pressed it to the reader. There was a beep, a clean, bright beep, the kind that means accepted. But my hand was still moving. I had not fully swiped it. I had barely even touched the reader. The beep happened too early, like the lock had responded to something that came before my card. For a moment, I just stood there, my fingers still holding the key card against the plastic. The little green light on the lock was lit, steady, waiting, as if it had been ready for me before I arrived. I pulled the card away and stared at the reader like it might explain itself. The hallway was quiet. No footsteps, no doors opening, no voices, just the distant HVAC hum and the memory of ice clattering like it was happening behind my own teeth. I told myself it was a sensitive reader, a glitch, a timing thing. Still, as I pushed down on the handle and felt the latch give, one thought slipped through all my normal explanations, cold and unwanted. The quiet side was quiet because people learned not to stay here. 1.2. The room as a trap. 1,050 words. The room smelled clean in the way a room smells clean when it has been cleaned fast. There was the sharp bite of disinfectant under everything, and something sweet on top of it, like air freshener sprayed into a corner and forgotten. The air conditioning was already running when I stepped inside. It breathed from the vent above the window in slow, even waves, not loud enough to bother you, but steady enough to fill the silence with a presence. Every few seconds, the fan shifted slightly, a tiny change in pitch that made it sound less like a machine and more like something settling in. I shut the door behind me and heard the latch click into place. It was supposed to feel final. Instead, it felt like a sentence ending too early. The room was standard, almost aggressively normal. Queen bed with a patterned comforter. Faux wood dresser with a flat-screen TV. A little desk with a lamp that cast a weak yellow circle of light. The carpet was that same old penny brown as the hallway, the kind that hides everything that ever spilled. On the wall above the headboard, a framed print of something calming. Water, trees, a sky that looked nothing like Missouri. I put my bag on the luggage rack, and the metal bars squeaked once, thin and strained, like they resented being used. When I set my phone down on the desk, the screen lit the room with that cold blue glow, and for a second, it felt like the only honest light in there. I checked the time. I checked the battery. I checked messages I already knew were there, because I was not ready to stop moving yet. I did the routine things people do when they are trying to pretend a bad night is just a normal night in a different place. I took a shower. The bathroom fan came on automatically and made a dry, rattling sound, like a small object spinning slightly off-center. The water took a few seconds to warm up, then it came hot and harsh, and the steam rose fast because the room was cold. The shower curtain clung to my arm once, the plastic sticking to skin, and I felt that brief, stupid panic you get when something touches you unexpectedly. I laughed at myself under the water, but it was the kind of laugh that dies immediately. When I stepped out, the mirror was fogged. My reflection was there anyway, blurred and pale. I wiped a strip clear with my hand and stared at my own eyes for a second, trying to find the person who had driven here. The person who had decided this was a reasonable solution. I turned on the TV, volume low. Something in the way hotel rooms absorb sound makes even a normal sitcom feel muffled and far away, like the laughter is coming from behind a wall. I sat on the edge of the bed and ate the snacks I had grabbed at a gas station without thinking. Chips that tasted like powdered cheese and salt, a bottle of water that was too warm. I wiped my fingers on a napkin, and the napkin stuck to my skin like it was damp. The mini fridge in the corner vibrated gently, a soft buzzing you could feel more than hear. Every once in a while it clicked, like it was making a decision. The air conditioning continued to breathe, and together those two sounds created a rhythm that almost felt comforting, like white noise. Almost. I went to hang the "Do Not Disturb" sign. It was on the little desk by the lamp, not on the door, as if someone had taken it down and placed it there deliberately. When I picked it up, I noticed it was creased through the middle, a deep fold like it had been bent back and forth too many times. The edges were worn, the laminated surface scratched. It was a small thing, nothing that mattered. Still, it made me think of hands. Different hands. Many hands. People who needed the sign and did not trust the door without it. People who had held this exact piece of plastic the way I was holding it now. I opened the door and hung it on the handle. The sign swung once and tapped softly against the wood. I looked at the peephole out of habit. The glass had a smear across it, a dull streak that caught the hallway light. It looked like someone had pressed an oily fingertip to it. Maybe a kid, maybe an employee, maybe me later, when I would check again and again. I wiped it with my shirt, but the smear did not fully go away. It just spread into a thinner haze. Then I tried the deadbolt. It turned, but it did not feel solid. There was a tiny wiggle in it, like the mechanism had worn down, like it did not seat all the way. I turned it again, harder, until it caught. Still, I could feel that faint looseness in the metal, that minute play, and it irritated me in a way I could not justify. A deadbolt should feel like a decision. This felt like a suggestion. I told myself it was fine. Hotels are like that. Nothing is perfect. I had stayed in places where the door had to be shoulder checked to close. This was a mid-range chain, not a prison. I sat back down on the bed, leaned against the headboard, and let the TV talk quietly at me while my phone glowed in my hand. I scrolled through nothing. I reread texts I did not want to answer. I watched the time crawl forward. The room settled. The building made its small sounds. Somewhere far away, a door closed. Somewhere deeper in the hall, the ice machine clattered again, sharp and quick. After that, everything went muffled and thick. I remember thinking, for the first time since I arrived, that maybe the clerk had been right. Maybe the quiet side really was quiet. Then came the knock. It was light, polite, 2 taps, not a pounding, not a frantic rattle, just tap, tap against the wood. The kind of knock you might give if you did not want to wake someone. I sat up straight immediately, the way your body does before your brain catches up. I muted the TV. The sudden absence of sound made the room feel smaller. I waited for a voice. Housekeeping. Front desk. Wrong room. Anything. Nothing. The air conditioning breathed. The mini fridge vibrated. My own heartbeat sounded louder than it should have. I stood up, walked toward the door, and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. Yellow light on brown carpet. Closed doors. Identical, stretching out in both directions. The haze on the peephole glass made the far end of the hall look soft and unreal, like a tunnel in a dream. I stayed still, listening. In that moment, I realized the carpet really did swallow sound. If someone was walking away, I might not hear it. If someone was standing close to the door, breathing, I might not hear that either. I did not speak. I did not open the door. I just stood there, one hand hovering near the latch like it might jump on its own. And then I heard it. A beep. Not from inside my room. Not from my phone. Not from the TV. From the hallway side of the door, right where the keycard reader sat. A clean, mechanical beep. Confident. Immediate. The lock clicked. I felt the deadbolt in my mind more than in my hand. That loose little wiggle suddenly mattered. That creased "Do Not Disturb" sign suddenly felt like a joke. The handle shifted slightly, as if someone had tested it with a careful grip. Then the door began to open, just a few inches. Not fast. Not like someone barging in. Slow, controlled, like whoever was on the other side had all the time in the world. The gap showed only darkness at first. Then a thin slice of hallway light pushed through, cutting across the carpet inside my room like a blade. The door paused there. A long pause. So long it stopped feeling like a mistake. It felt like listening. Whoever was outside did not say a word. They did not apologize. They did not explain. They waited, holding the door partly open, as if they were measuring whether I would speak first, and learning from my silence. In that frozen gap, with the AC breathing and the mini fridge vibrating like a nervous animal, I understood something simple and terrifying. This door could be opened from the outside without anyone announcing themselves, and whoever was doing it was not confused. They were paying attention. 1.3, the slam and the vanishing body, 100 words. For a few seconds, I did not move. That is the part I hate admitting, because I always imagined that if something like this ever happened, I would react like the version of myself in my head. I would shout. I would grab something. I would do something decisive and loud enough to snap the moment in half. Instead, I stood there in the thin strip of lamplight, staring at the crack in my door like it was a mouth that had opened just enough to show teeth. The door was still held a few inches ajar. The hallway light spilled through the gap and laid a pale line across the carpet. And everything inside my room looked suddenly staged, like furniture placed for a photo. The TV was muted. My phone screen had dimmed. All I could hear was the air conditioning breathing above the window and that gentle, nervous vibration of the mini fridge in the corner. The pause continued. Whoever was outside did not push the door open farther. They did not pull it shut. They just held it there, perfectly still, as if they were waiting for me to prove I was alone or prove I was awake. My throat tightened. I realized that if I stayed silent, I was giving them the one thing they wanted: control of the pace. So I did the most American, most stupid thing possible. I tried to force the situation back into normal. I cleared my throat and said, loud enough for the hallway to hear, "No, thanks, not right now." The words came out firm, almost polite, the kind of tone you use on a salesperson at your door. The kind of tone that pretends there is a normal explanation, that pretends the person on the other side will feel embarrassed and step away. For half a beat, nothing happened. The door did not move. The crack remained. The hallway light stayed sliced across the carpet. Then the door shifted just slightly, like the person outside adjusted their grip. And then it stopped again. The silence that followed was worse than the beep, worse than the lock click. It felt deliberate, as if my words had been tested and found interesting. I took a step forward, my hand hovering near the handle. I did not want to touch it, because touching it felt like agreeing to the same script. I wanted to be able to say later that I never opened the door for them, that I never invited anything. I said again, "I'm good. Not right now." Still no voice, no explanation, no "sorry, wrong room," no housekeeping. Just that held breath, stretched out, then the door slammed shut. Not gently, not like someone letting go. It was a hard, angry slam that hit the frame with a dry crack. The whole door shuddered. The "Do Not Disturb" sign on the outside tapped rapidly against the wood, like something trying to get my attention from the other side. I jumped, my muscles firing all at once, and my heart went off like an alarm in my chest. The slam was followed by a tiny sound I noticed only because the world had gone so quiet. A soft plastic rattle, like a card brushing a key ring or a lanyard snapping against a badge. Footsteps did not follow. No retreating thump down the hall. The carpet swallowed everything. I stood there with my hand half raised, trying to convince myself that I had just scared off an employee who had made a mistake. I went to the deadbolt. I turned it, expecting to feel that solid resistance, that final lock. Instead, the knob rotated too easily, like it had never been fully set. I pushed it harder until it caught, and the feeling was wrong. Too smooth, too loose. My stomach dropped as the earlier little wiggle in the mechanism returned to my fingertips, like it had been waiting to say "I told you so." Then I checked the latch. The latch was down, but in that moment I could not trust my own memory. I could not remember if I had secured it before, or if I had told myself I would and never did. I could not remember if the door had opened because I was careless, or because the building itself was careless on purpose. My brain kept circling the same thought like a dog pacing a fence. The lock beeped from outside. The lock clicked. The door opened. I walked to the peephole again, because the part of me that wanted proof was louder than the part that wanted comfort. The hallway was empty. The yellow lighting made the corridor look sick. It was not bright enough to feel safe and not dim enough to feel romantic. It was that in-between hotel lighting that makes people's faces look drained. The carpet stretched out in both directions like a strip of old felt, and the doors were lined up so evenly they looked like they had been copied and pasted. For a second, I saw nothing but stillness. Then, at the far end of my view, near the corner where the hall turned, I caught movement. It was not a full person, not even close, just a leg. A right leg in dark pants, stepping around the corner, and a flash of something like a uniform hem swinging with it. The movement was so quick I almost missed it, and the smear on the peephole glass made it softer at the edges, like I was watching it through fog. If I had been telling the story later and someone had asked me what I saw, I could not have described their face. I could not have described their hands. I could not have described anything that would have made it simple. But the leg was too specific to be nothing, too human to be a shadow, too perfectly timed to be coincidence. I pressed my eye harder to the peephole. I held my breath. Nothing else moved. No sound of an elevator, no door opening, no shoes on carpet. It was like the corridor had swallowed the person whole. I backed away from the door and felt the temperature of the room for the first time. Too cold, too dry. The air conditioning suddenly sounded louder, like the building wanted to cover the silence it had created. The mini fridge buzzed in a steady, indifferent way, as if it had no opinion on what just happened. I did not sit down again. I grabbed my phone, my wallet, my keys. I threw my snacks back into my bag. I did not even fold my shirt or hang my towel. I moved like someone packing in a fire, fast and ugly, as if the room might change its mind and open again while my hands were full. When I opened the door, I did it with my shoulder braced, like I expected someone to be leaning on the other side. There was nobody, just the long hall and the stale yellow light. The "Do Not Disturb" sign hung crookedly on the handle outside, tapping once in the HVAC draft. I walked to the elevator, and my footsteps made almost no sound. That bothered me more than it should have. It made me feel like I could not prove I was moving. Downstairs, the lobby looked exactly the same as it had before. Same detergent smell, same muted news, same brochure rack, same coffee station with its thin, bitter scent. The clerk looked up when I approached, and for half a second her expression was neutral. Just a blank face, not smiling yet. I said, "I need to switch rooms." Her smile appeared, but it did not reach her eyes. "Is something wrong with the room?" I told her a version of the truth that sounded sane. I said I heard someone at my door. I said the lock beeped. I said the door opened. Her eyebrows lifted slightly, like she was surprised, but her hands moved toward the keyboard immediately, ready, like this was not new information, like she had done this before. "We can move you," she said, voice smooth. "No problem." I watched her type. I watched the monitor glow on her face. I watched the security camera screen beside her flicker again, a small jump forward like a skipped heartbeat. She slid a new keycard across the counter and held out her hand for the old one. I hesitated. It was ridiculous, but I felt attached to that cheap piece of plastic, not because it mattered, but because it was proof that I had been assigned that room. Proof that I had not imagined the beep. Proof that the door had responded to something. My fingers tightened around it for one last second. Then I handed it back. The moment it left my hand, a cold thought landed in my gut, heavy and simple. For a second, it felt like I had just turned over evidence to the one place that could make it disappear. 2.1. The first cover story, 1,050 words. The lobby did not change when I came back down. That was the first thing that made me feel crazy. The building looked the same as it had 5 minutes earlier, as if nothing unsettling could possibly happen here. The muted news on the TV kept scrolling. The coffee station sat untouched. The HVAC kept humming like a patient animal. The front doors opened once for a couple walking in with a rolling suitcase, and the little rush of warm air followed them inside and died quietly against the cold. The clerk's posture was identical too, shoulders squared behind the counter, hands ready over the keyboard. She looked up at me with the same practiced face, a half smile already prepared. "I need to switch rooms," I said again, because saying it once had not made it real. Her smile softened a fraction. "Is there something wrong with the room?" The question was so calm that it irritated me. It turned what had happened into a complaint, like I was unhappy with the pillows or the Wi-Fi. "There was someone at my door," I said. The lock beeped from the outside. The door opened. I watched her eyes for a reaction. Not fear, not sympathy, just recognition. Her eyebrows lifted slightly and then settled. "It was probably a staff check," she said, like she was reading a note off the wall behind me. "A staff check," I repeated. The words tasted wrong. She nodded once, crisp. "Sometimes maintenance or housekeeping will check that a lock is working, especially if we had a guest earlier with an issue." "You didn't tell me there was an issue," I said before I could stop myself. The clerk kept the same calm voice. "I'm sorry. It's usually nothing." They should have announced themselves. They didn't, I said. Her smile tightened. I understand. We can move you to another room. The way she said it, like moving me was the solution, like the act of relocating would erase whatever had just happened, made my skin itch. I leaned slightly closer to the counter and lowered my voice, because there were other guests nearby, and I did not want to sound like a man losing control in public. Who can open the doors from the outside? I asked. Who has keys? Her nails tapped lightly on the keyboard, a quick staccato that sounded like small teeth. She did not look at the camera monitor beside her, but I did. The feeds were still a little washed out. The front door image seemed to jump again, a tiny hiccup like a blink. Only management has master access, she said. It was too fast, too smooth. A rehearsed answer that had been polished by repetition. Only management, I echoed. Yes, she said. Her eyes flicked up to mine for a second, then away. And staff have their own access when they're on shift. It's controlled. Controlled. That word landed like an insult. I pictured the door to my room opening a few inches and holding there, silent. Controlled. I pictured the pause. I pictured the slam. If it was housekeeping, I said, why didn't they say anything? Her shoulders lifted a fraction, the tiniest shrug, then settled back into place. They should have, she said, still calm. I'm sorry? It can happen. People make mistakes. It can happen. Like losing a towel can happen. Like forgetting a wake-up call can happen. I wanted to argue with her. I wanted to push the reality of it across the counter and make her hold it with me. But I could feel the lobby behind me. I could feel other eyes. I could feel my own voice threatening to get louder, and I hated the idea of being the guy who freaked out at a hotel. So I changed tactics. I want a room on the first floor, I said, near the lobby. Her fingers paused. First floor, she repeated, as if she needed to confirm she had heard me. Yes, I said, closer to people. For the first time, something in her expression shifted. Not fear, not concern. Something like mild irritation quickly masked, like I was requesting extra work. We do have rooms on the first floor, she said. I can put you in one. Near the lobby, I repeated. I want to hear the doors, the elevator, anything. She nodded and started typing again. The keyboard clicks sounded louder to me now, like the building was amplifying them. I watched her hands move. I watched the screen glow on her face. I watched her do exactly what she had done when she checked me in, except this time there was no small talk, no friendly rhythm. She did not reach for a notepad. She did not pull out a form. She did not press a button to call anyone on the little desk phone. No incident log. No, I'll alert security. No, let me talk to the supervisor. Just the quiet swap of plastic. She slid a new key card across the counter in a new paper sleeve. The sleeve had the same hotel logo, the same little printed line for room number, the same corporate smile. She held out her other hand for my old card. I hesitated again. The old card felt heavier than it should have. Proof, even if it was flimsy proof. Can you note it? I asked. The door opening. Her eyes lifted. The smile returned, thin. I'll let my manager know, she said. I knew she would not in the way I meant. I handed her the old card anyway. My fingers brushed hers, and her skin was cool, like she had been touching the same chilled counter surface all night. She dropped the card into a little tray without looking at it, like it was trash. Do you want me to send someone to help you move? She asked. No, I said immediately. The idea of a stranger coming to my room with a key card after what had just happened made my stomach twist. If I needed anything right then, it was to keep the number of people involved as small as possible. One more witness, one more variable, one more chance for the situation to slip back into normal and become my fault. I took the new card and the sleeve, and she pointed toward the hallway. "Down the hall, first door on the left," she said. "It's quieter down there too." Quieter. Again with that word, like the building's quiet was a feature, not a warning sign. I walked away from the desk and felt the lobby sounds change behind me. The HVAC hum faded as I moved into the corridor. The carpet ate my footsteps again. The air felt colder, denser. The lights were lower down here, more yellow, as if the hotel had decided the first-floor guests did not need to see things clearly. My new room was close enough to the lobby that I could hear the front doors when they opened. I could hear the faint whoosh of the automatic slide if I listened. That made me feel better in a primitive way. Noise meant life. Noise meant witnesses. I unlocked the door. This time I swiped the card deliberately, slowly, watching the reader light up. The beep came at the right moment. The green light flashed. The handle turned. Inside, the room looked almost identical to the one upstairs. Same furniture, same carpet, same dead air that smelled like fast cleaning. I shut the door and immediately flipped the deadbolt. I pulled the latch down. I tested the handle. I tested it again. I stood there with my hand on the metal, feeling for that looseness I had felt before. It seemed tighter here, a little more solid. I exhaled, slow. Then I walked to the desk and set my phone down. The lamp cast its weak circle of yellow light over the tabletop. The TV was off. The room was quiet except for the low breath of the AC. On the desk, beside the phone book and the little card advertising breakfast, there was a paper sleeve, another keycard sleeve, same hotel branding, same cheap paper, same printed line where a room number would go. But it wasn't mine. It was already there, placed neatly like it belonged. And if I tilted it toward the light, I could see where someone had written a room number before, faintly, pressed into the paper as if it had been traced hard with a pen. The ink had been erased or rubbed away, but the indentation remained. A different room number than the one I had just been assigned. I picked it up, and the paper felt warm, like it had been touched recently. For a moment, I just stood there, holding that sleeve, listening to the hotel breathe through the vent. It looked like something simple, a mistake, a piece of trash that housekeeping forgot to throw away. But my mind made the connection before I could stop it. Someone had swapped materials in a hurry. Someone had been in this room before me, close enough in time that their paper still held the shape of their room number. And for the first time since I checked in, I wondered if the hotel was not moving me to safety. I wondered if it was moving me to a room that had already been prepared. 2.2. Sleeping near the lobby, 1,050 words. I treated that first-floor room like it was a test I could pass if I was careful enough. The second the door shut behind me, I locked everything again. Deadbolt first, then the swing bar latch. Then I turned the handle and pulled against it to make sure the door would not give. I did it twice, not because the second time added protection, but because my hands needed to feel the motion repeat until my brain stopped replaying the door opening upstairs. I dragged my suitcase off the luggage rack and set it on the floor directly in front of the door, angled so that if the door moved inward even an inch, it would scrape. The wheels clicked against the tile strip at the threshold. The sound was small, but it made me feel like I had done something physical, something that would leave evidence in noise if I was wrong again. I kept the lamp on, not full brightness, just the bedside lamp and the desk lamp, enough to soften the corners. The room still looked normal in that hotel way. Clean lines, bland art, a framed print that meant nothing. But the details had started to change for me. The same furniture was no longer neutral. It was furniture in a room I did not truly own, arranged to make a stranger feel calm enough to sleep. I placed the keycard sleeve, the extra one, on the desk under the lamp, like I was pinning down a thought. I told myself I would show it to the front desk in the morning. I told myself I would ask a manager, someone older, someone with authority. I told myself a lot of things that sounded good in the light. Then I realized I was listening. The lobby was not far. I could hear the automatic doors when they opened. That soft whoosh of air and mechanism, like a breath being taken and released. Every time it happened, it was followed by a brief thread of warmer air that seemed to push under my door and then vanish. I could hear the elevator too, faint but distinct. A cheerful ding, then the dull slide of doors, then the muffled squeak of a rolling suitcase wheel on carpet. Once or twice I heard distant laughter. Not loud, not close, just a burst of human sound that reminded me there were other people in the building. That should have been comforting. It almost was. For a moment, I could pretend I was the only anxious person here, and everyone else was living their normal life. But the room's own sounds never let me fully settle. The air conditioning cycled like a metronome. It came on, ran for the same amount of time, then eased down, then came on again. The rhythm was too even, too perfect. The pitch shifted in the exact same pattern each time, like it was following a program designed by someone who had never spent a night alone listening in the dark. I knew logically that machines are repetitive. That is what they do. Still, my body did not like it. It made the room feel timed, like something could synchronize with it, like someone could wait for the exact moment the fan changed pitch to cover another sound. I turned on the TV for noise, but kept it low. A movie played in the background, the dialogue soft and distant, almost like the muted news in the lobby. When I scrolled my phone, the screen glow reflected in the window and made the curtain look faintly translucent, like there was a lighter space behind it. The parking lot lights outside pressed through the fabric in a dull orange haze, outlining the folds. I checked the lock again. I checked the latch again. I checked them a third time, angry at myself for checking them a third time. I sat on the bed, shoes off, socks still on, because I did not want to fully commit to comfort. I ate a few more chips without tasting them. My tongue felt dry. My stomach felt tight, like the argument with my wife had moved from my throat into my gut and stayed there. At some point, the TV became a soft blur. My phone slipped from my hand onto the blanket. The AC kept breathing its measured pattern. The elevator dinged once, then again, and then the lobby quieted down, as if the building itself was preparing for sleep. I remember the moment I started to drift, not because it was peaceful, but because it felt like giving up. My eyes closed. The darkness behind them was thick and immediate. The last sound I registered consciously was the mini fridge's faint vibration and the far-off whoosh of the doors as someone came in late. Then my thoughts loosened, and the room became only sensation. Cold air, soft mattress, distant machinery. I do not know how long I slept. 10 minutes, an hour, maybe less. Time in a hotel is strange because you have no anchors, no familiar noises. I woke because of a sound that did not belong to the building. A soft rustle. Not the steady hum of the AC, not the click of the fridge, not even the plastic rattle of a keycard in a pocket. Cloth, fabric shifting. The sound was close, very close, somewhere near the foot of the bed, where my blanket ended and the air began. My eyes snapped open, and the room was darker than I expected. The lamps were off. I did not remember turning them off. The TV was off too. A black rectangle on the dresser reflecting nothing. For a second I lay there, perfectly still, trying to listen without moving. The parking lot light pressed through the curtains, making the fabric glow faintly, turning it into a pale sheet with darker folds. The rest of the room was mostly shadow. Shapes existed only as suggestion. The outline of the desk, the dresser, the chair. The AC was running, same metronome cycle, same pitch. That meant the building had not gone silent. That meant the darkness was not because the power went out. My mouth felt dry. My heart started to beat hard enough that I could feel it in my throat. I kept my head still and moved only my eyes, scanning the room. I tried to make sense of the shadows. I tried to find the logical source of the cloth sound. Maybe I had kicked the blanket. Maybe the curtain had shifted. Maybe the AC draft moved something. Then the cloth sound came again. A gentle, deliberate movement, like someone adjusting a sleeve. And I understood, in the simple animal part of my brain, that the sound was not random. It was the sound a person makes when they are trying not to make sound. I swallowed. The small click in my throat felt loud. I turned my head toward the foot of the bed. At first, I saw only darkness. Then my eyes adjusted just enough to separate one shape from the rest. A figure stood at the foot of my bed, tall and still, blocking a portion of the faint glow from the curtains. The outline was wrong in a way that hit me instantly. It was not the chair. It was not the lamp. It was not a trick of fabric. It was a standing body. It did not move when I looked at it. It did not speak. It simply occupied the space where no one should have been able to stand without opening a door, crossing a room, and making a sound I would have heard. I lay there, frozen, staring at it, and in that moment, the safer room felt like the most perfect trap in the world. Because now I had done everything right, and it had still gotten in. 2.3. You have to let them in. 100 words. For a second, I convinced myself it was the room playing tricks on me. Hotel darkness has a way of turning furniture into people. A chair becomes shoulders. A coat rack becomes a head. Your eyes wake faster than your brain, and the brain fills in the worst shape it can imagine because the worst shape is the one you cannot afford to miss. But the shape at the foot of my bed did not have the wrong kind of stillness. It had the deliberate stillness of something waiting. I lay there with my hands clenched against the blanket, trying to breathe without making noise, trying to decide whether to move first or pretend I was still asleep. The parking lot light behind the curtain made the figure a darker cutout against a pale background. I could not see a face. I could not see clothing details. I could only see height and the certainty that something was occupying space. Then, very softly, I heard that fabric sound again. Not from the curtain, from the figure itself. A sleeve shifting, a hem brushing a pant leg, a human adjustment. My throat tightened so hard it hurt. I kept my voice low, not because I was trying to be brave, but because speaking louder felt like giving the room permission to become a scene. "Hello?" I said. No answer. The AC continued its metronome cycle above the window, the same pitch it had been all night. The mini fridge vibrated faintly. The building was alive with normal sounds. and that made what was happening feel more unreal, not less. Like this was not an emergency. Like this was just another kind of routine. I reached my right hand toward the bedside table, moving slowly, keeping my eyes on the figure. My fingers found the lamp switch. The plastic knob felt warm from the room, slick with sweat from my own palm. I hesitated for half a beat, because turning on the light meant committing to what I was seeing. Then I clicked it. The lamp came on with a small pop in the bulb, a quick bright flare that made my eyes sting. The room snapped into focus all at once, harsh and flat and undeniable. A woman stood at the foot of my bed. She was older, late 50s, maybe 60s, but not in a grandmotherly way. Her hair was gray and thin, pulled back loosely, as if she had done it with one hand. She wore a housekeeping uniform that looked official from a distance. Dark pants, a collared shirt, but up close it looked wrong. The fabric was wrinkled. The shirt was half-tucked. The collar sat crooked at her neck. Her eyes were too wide, not with surprise, with intent. Like she had been awake for days and was still focused on the same thought. In one hand, she held a messy keyring. Not a neat, hotel-issued ring. A clump of keys and plastic tags and one dangling card that did not belong among the metal. The card swung slightly as she breathed, and it tapped the keys with a tiny, repeating tick. Plastic against metal. Plastic against metal. Like a slow, patient clock. That sound, more than her face, made my stomach turn. Because it was the kind of sound you hear when someone is standing very close to you, and they have been close long enough for their small movements to become audible. She stared down at me like she was looking at something that had been misplaced. Then she spoke. Her voice was soft at first, almost gentle, like she was trying to coax a child to do something simple. "You have to let them in," she said. The sentence did not fit the room. It did not fit the situation. It did not fit any normal explanation. It landed in the air like a line from a play that no one else had been given. I pushed myself backward against the headboard, pulling the blanket up instinctively, like fabric could protect me from a person standing in my space. "What are you doing?" I managed. She did not answer that. She did not even react to the question. She repeated the phrase a little more firmly, as if she had not been heard the first time. "You have to let them in." The plastic card on her ring swung again. Tick, tick. My mind tried to find a name tag on her shirt, a hotel logo, anything that could pull her into reality. I saw no name tag. If there had been one, it had been torn off. The spot where it would sit looked slightly darker, like a shadow in the fabric. "How did you get in here?" I asked. My voice cracked on the last word. Her eyes flicked for a moment to the door behind her, and then back to me, like the door was not even a barrier worth mentioning. "You have to let them in," she said again, but this time her tone shifted. The softness thinned, irritation bled through, like patience running out. It was the way you might speak to someone who keeps doing the wrong thing even after being told. "You have to," she insisted. "You have to." She took a step closer. The key ring clinked. The card tapped metal. Tick. My body reacted before my thoughts did. I kicked the blanket off and tried to slide off the bed to the side opposite her, aiming for the door. The movement was clumsy, panicked. The mattress dipped and bounced under me. The bed frame creaked once, loud in the room. Her hand shot out. She grabbed at my shirt near the collar. Her grip was not strong. I could tell immediately she did not have much muscle left, but she was not grabbing to hold me in place like a child tugging a sleeve. She was grabbing with purpose, fingers curling hard, nails biting into fabric. Her face tightened, and she said the words again, faster now, angry, as if the phrase itself was the only tool she had. You have to let them in. You have to let them in. You have to. The weakness of her grip did not make it less terrifying. It made it worse because it meant she was not relying on strength. She was relying on access. I shoved her arm away and stumbled to my feet. She swayed, but did not fall. The key rings swung and clattered as she tried to grab again. I did not think. I did not form a plan. I moved. I ran for the door, yanked the latch, fumbled the deadbolt so hard my fingers slipped on the metal, and threw the door open. Cold hallway air hit my face. Dim yellow light, brown carpet, silent doors lined up like teeth. I bolted out, barefoot, not caring who saw me, not caring if I looked insane. I ran down the hall toward the lobby, because the lobby meant people and cameras and witnesses, even if the cameras were half blind. Behind me, I heard the woman's shoes scuff on carpet, but the sound was swallowed almost immediately, as if the building did not want to record her movement. The elevator dinged somewhere above, cheerful and wrong. I reached the lobby corridor, and the automatic doors whooshed open as a late guest stepped inside, rolling a suitcase. For a split second, their face turned toward me, confused, and then away, as if looking at me too long might involve them. I slammed both hands onto the front desk so hard the counter shook. The night clerk on duty was not the young woman from earlier. This clerk was a man in his 40s, maybe, with tired eyes and a posture that sagged like he had been standing too long. He looked up, startled, then immediately annoyed, like he had been pulled out of a quiet night. "Sir," he started. "There was someone in my room," I said. My voice sounded raw. "A staff member, a woman. She got in. She was standing at my bed." His eyes narrowed. "Did you lock your—" "Yes," I snapped. "Yes. Deadbolt, latch, everything. She had keys." That did it. That changed something in his face. The annoyance drained away and left a blank alertness, like a switch had been flipped behind his eyes. "She had keys," I repeated, and then I said the word that had been sitting in my throat since the first beep upstairs, the word I had not wanted to say because saying it made it real. Master. The clerk's expression tightened so fast it was almost a flinch. He did not ask me to calm down. He did not tell me to wait. He reached under the counter for a radio, brought it to his mouth, and spoke into it in a low voice that was suddenly very awake. "Check, Master," he said. 2 words, quiet, flat, but they landed like a confession, because he did not say, "Check the hallway." He did not say, "Send housekeeping." He did not say, "Call security." He said, "Check, Master," as if the problem was not a person, as if the problem was the system itself. 3.1 Police lights and the lobby lie, 1,050 words. When the police arrived, they made the lobby look honest. That is the best way I can explain it. The red and blue lights outside the front doors painted the glass in moving color, and suddenly the place stopped feeling like a quiet, forgettable hotel and started feeling like a scene that would exist in someone else's life. The flashing reflections dragged everything into focus. The brochure stand, the coffee station, the fake wood cabinets, the little security monitor perched near the counter like a toy. For a second, I felt relief. The kind of relief that comes when authority enters a situation and your brain says, "Good, someone will handle this." Then the relief curdled into embarrassment, because now I was the barefoot man in a wrinkled t-shirt, standing in a hotel lobby at midnight, trying to explain that an old housekeeping woman had been in my room whispering a phrase that sounded like nonsense. My adrenaline was still high, but the fluorescent lighting made it hard to keep the fear feeling real. The longer I stood there, the more it threatened to become a story I would later question myself. The night clerk kept glancing past me toward the hall, as if he expected her to come shuffling out at any moment. He held his radio in one hand and did not use it again. His face had taken on that careful expression people get when something happens at work that might cost someone money. The automatic doors whooshed open and 2 officers stepped inside. They were local, not state troopers, not highway patrol. Their uniforms looked slightly rumpled, like they had been sitting in a car for hours. One was taller and younger, with a close-cropped haircut and a calm, blank face. The other was older, heavier, with tired eyes and the kind of body language that said he had answered too many calls about people who were drunk, or angry, or both. "Who called?" the older one asked. The clerk lifted a hand toward me without fully pointing. "He did," he said. "Guest reported an employee in his room." He did not say intruder. He did not say break-in. He did not say master key. An employee. That word was the first lie. The younger officer looked at me and asked the first question cops always ask, the question that turns panic into paperwork. "What's your name, sir?" I told him. He asked for my ID. I had it in my wallet, and my hands shook as I pulled it out. Not shaking like I was cold, shaking like my body was still trying to run. He asked what room I was in. I told him the first floor room number. He asked what happened, and I forced myself to speak in order. The beep, the wake-up, the figure, the lamp, the woman, the phrase, the keys, the run to the lobby. As I spoke, I could feel the edges of the story sharpening into something that sounded ridiculous in a brightly lit public space. The phrase, "You have to let them in," did not belong in a police report. It belonged in a horror movie. I watched the younger officer's face as I said it, waiting for a flicker. Skepticism, humor, annoyance. He gave nothing away. He just nodded and kept his eyes on me. The older officer asked, "Did she threaten you? Did she have a weapon?" "No," I said quickly. "She grabbed me, I swallowed, feeling the shame of it rise. "She tried to pull me back." "How hard?" he asked. "Not hard," I admitted. "She wasn't strong, but she was in my room." That was the part that mattered. That was the part that kept my voice steady. The older officer nodded and turned to the clerk. "What's the employee's name?" The clerk blinked just once. I'm not sure," he said. The older officer's stare didn't change. "You're not sure." The clerk's smile flickered on his face and then vanished again. "It might have been one of housekeeping," he said. "We have an older lady sometimes. She can get confused." Confused. That was the second lie. The younger officer asked, "Do you have her name?" The clerk shook his head too fast. I'd have to check the schedule." "You don't know her name," the older officer repeated, slower. "And she has access to guest rooms." The clerk's mouth tightened. "It's a misunderstanding," he said. I watched them carefully then, because the clerk was not looking at the police when he said it. He was looking at me, like he was asking me to accept the story, like he was offering me a way to make it smaller, a misunderstanding. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to grab the security monitor and shove it at them and say, "Look, this place does not even record time correctly. This place does not even see correctly. How do you misunderstand a door opening in the middle of the night?" But I stayed quiet because part of me still wanted to be reasonable. Part of me still wanted the system to work. The younger officer looked around the lobby. "Any cameras?" he asked. The clerk gestured to the little monitor, then pointed vaguely toward the ceiling corners. "We have cameras," he said, "but I'm not sure how much they pick up in the halls." The younger officer walked behind the counter without asking permission. Not aggressively, just like he knew he could. He leaned in toward the monitor, eyes narrowing. The feed flickered. The front door view jumped forward a second, then stabilized. The parking lot view looked grainy and washed out, the blinking red camera light outside shining like a tiny star. The younger officer stared at the elevator camera feed. "Is this live?" he asked. "It should be," the clerk said. His voice went slightly higher. The older officer stepped toward me. "Let's go to your room," he said. My stomach dropped at the idea, but I nodded. I needed them to see the door. I needed them to test it. I needed someone else to stand in that space and say, "Yes, something is wrong." We walked down the hall. The carpet swallowed our steps. Their radios crackled softly and then went silent. The hallway looked even more drained under police presence, like the yellow light was embarrassed. At my door, the older officer asked me to show him how I locked it. I pointed out the deadbolt, the latch, the suitcase I had wedged as a noise trap. He crouched and examined the door frame, the strike plate, the lock. He tested the handle gently. He pushed on the door. Nothing moved. "It's secure," he said. I felt my face heat. Of course it was secure now. Of course, in the presence of law enforcement, everything would behave. The younger officer asked, "How did she get in then?" "I don't know," I said. "But she did." The older officer glanced at the keycard reader. "Keycards," he murmured, as if speaking to himself. The clerk, who had followed us down the hall with his hands clasped in front of him, stepped forward too quickly. "Like I said," he said, "it was probably a confused employee. We'll handle it internally." Internally. That was the third lie. The older officer looked at him. "Handle it how?" he asked. The clerk's smile appeared again, brittle. "We'll talk to her," he said. "Make sure she understands." "What's her name?" The older officer cut in. The clerk hesitated, just long enough. "We call her Rosie," he said finally. "Or Rosa, something like that. Something like that." I watched the younger officer's eyes shift briefly to the older one, a quick, silent conversation. Then the younger one turned away and ran his fingers along the edge of the keycard reader like he was thinking. I could feel the hotel staff trying to steer everything toward a simple narrative. Confused employee, no danger, case closed. I could feel the officers balancing between this might be real and this might be a guest overreacting. And in that narrow space between those two possibilities, my fear had nowhere to rest. We walked back toward the lobby. The older officer stayed slightly behind me, and when the clerk moved ahead to open the hallway door, the older officer leaned closer to my shoulder and spoke in a low voice, almost casual. "Just so you know," he said, "we've had calls like this at hotels." The words hit me like a sudden cold draft. I turned my head slightly. "Calls like what?" I whispered back. His mouth tightened. His eyes flicked forward, toward the clerk, toward the camera monitor, toward the front desk where the story was being shaped. He stopped mid-thought, like he had reached an invisible line. Then he cleared his throat and straightened up. And "Just keep your door locked," he said, louder, official now, as if that was all he had meant. And the way he said it, flat, practiced, final, made it clear that whatever he had been about to tell me was not something he wanted in the air where the hotel could hear. 3.2. The missing master key. 1,050 words. Back in the lobby, everything tried to return to its previous shape. The officers stood near the front desk under the harsh ceiling lights, their shadows faint on the tile. The clerk stayed behind the counter with his hands resting on the keyboard like he could type his way out of the night. The muted news kept crawling along the TV, captions sliding by under a smiling anchor, as if nothing in this building mattered enough to be spoken out loud. But the air had changed. There was a thin tension now, stretched between the desk and the doors, between the security monitor and the officers' radios. Every sound in the lobby seemed sharper because of it. The little bursts of radio static, the printer clicking awake, the ice machine clattering somewhere deeper in the hotel, dumping a load with sudden violence and then settling into a soft, wet hiss. The older officer asked again, "So you're saying this was an employee?" The clerk nodded too quickly. "Yes, sir. Housekeeping. She must have gotten confused." The younger officer looked at the security monitor again, and the feed jumped forward in a way that made my stomach tighten. A few frames lost, then the picture stabilized. The front door view showed nothing but the empty entrance. The parking lot view showed my car under a light, washed out and pale. The older officer turned to me. "Do you want to press charges?" he asked. The question made my mouth go dry. Press charges against who? A woman whose name the hotel could not even say without stuttering? A phantom employee who might not exist on any schedule? The hotel itself? "I want to know how she got in," I said instead. My voice sounded steady, but inside I felt the anger rising, hot and helpless. "I want to know who can open doors here." The clerk smiled again, thin. "We take security very seriously," he said. That was the kind of sentence that means nothing. It was corporate air. The older officer stared at him. "Then explain the access," he said. The clerk licked his lips. His eyes flicked down to the counter, then up. He glanced briefly toward the hallway, as if expecting someone to appear and save him. "We use key cards," he said, like I had not already heard the beep of them with my own ears. "Guests have their key cards. Staff have staff cards." "And master access?" the younger officer asked. The clerk hesitated. It was small. Half a second, but it was there. "Management has master access," he said finally. The older officer leaned his weight onto the counter. "Does housekeeping have master access?" "No," the clerk said quickly. "No, they shouldn't." Shouldn't. The word landed heavy. I stepped closer, unable to keep it in anymore. "Then how was she in my room?" I asked. "How did she open it upstairs earlier? How did she open it when I had deadbolt and latch?" The clerk's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in calculation. He was trying to decide which version of the story he could afford. The printer behind him suddenly spat out a sheet of paper with a mechanical whine. The sound was loud in the lobby, like a laugh with no humor. The clerk reached back and tore the paper free without looking at it, then set it face down on the counter as if hiding it would make it less real. The older officer watched that motion. "What was that?" he asked. "Just a nightly report," the clerk said quickly. "System prints automatically." The younger officer tilted his head. "Your system prints automatically when the police show up?" he asked, dry. The clerk forced a laugh that did not travel. "No," he said. It's a schedule thing." I could feel the situation sliding toward the edge of its own truth. The officers were not hostile, but they were no longer buying the easy story, and the clerk was running out of language that could keep the hotel clean. The older officer's radio squawked softly. A voice, unreadable, said something about another call. The older officer pressed the radio closer to his shoulder, listened, then ignored it for a moment. He looked at the clerk again. "Tell me what's going on," he said, "because this doesn't sound like confusion." The clerk's jaw tightened. He looked tired now, genuinely tired, not sleepy. Tired in the way people look when they have been told to protect something that should not be protected. He leaned forward slightly and lowered his voice, as if volume alone could create privacy in a building full of cameras. "A MasterCard was reported missing earlier," he said. The sentence dropped into the lobby like a heavy object. The younger officer's eyes sharpened. "Missing how?" he asked. The clerk swallowed. "An employee said they couldn't find it," he said. "It might have been misplaced." Misplaced, like it had fallen behind a couch cushion, like it was a pen. My blood went cold. I did not even feel surprised. I felt confirmed, and that was worse. "How long ago?" the older officer asked. "Earlier in the evening," the clerk said, "before my shift started." "And what did you do?" the older officer asked. The clerk lifted both hands slightly, palms up, a gesture that could have been helplessness or performance. "We're obligated to report it to management," he said. "We did. The manager will—" "Did you reset the locks?" I snapped. The clerk turned his eyes to me like I had just spoken out of line. "Resetting locks isn't instant," he said. "Did you alert guests?" I pressed. "Did you tell anyone?" The clerk's mouth tightened again. "We handle these things internally," he said. Internal again. That word was starting to sound like a curse. The younger officer asked, "So you have a missing master keycard, and you didn't notify guests, and you didn't reprogram locks, and you're calling this a confused employee?" The clerk's face flushed. "The manager handles reprogramming," he said. "We're not authorized to do that." The older officer nodded slowly, the way you nod when someone has just admitted the thing you suspected. "So right now," he said, "you're running the hotel with a master key unaccounted for." The clerk did not answer immediately. The silence stretched. The HVAC kept humming. The muted news kept crawling. The ice machine clattered again somewhere down the hall, loud and sudden, and the timing of it made my stomach twist, as if the building itself was reacting. I leaned forward. "Why wasn't every door rekeyed?" I demanded. My voice was louder than I intended, and a guest on the lobby couch looked up, startled. "Why wasn't the whole hotel locked down?" The clerk looked at me with exhausted eyes. Real exhaustion, not the fake desk smile. He said carefully, like he was choosing words that would protect him later, "That is not how it works. It's a process. We have protocols. We have to report, then management." "Protocols," I repeated, bitter. He nodded, almost pleading. "We take security seriously," he said again, like a spell. The older officer exhaled through his nose. The younger officer stared at the clerk, then at the security monitor, then back. In that moment, the truth settled in my chest with a slow, nauseating weight. The hotel was not reacting like a place that had lost control. It was reacting like a place that had practiced losing control. And the missing master key was not just an accident. It was an event they knew how to talk around. 3.3. Proof that should not exist. 100 words. The anger peaked in the lobby because the lobby was built to absorb anger. That is what I understand now. Hotels are designed to take human emotion and flatten it. People cry at the front desk. People scream about reservations. People beg for refunds and extra pillows and late checkouts. The building swallows it all under fluorescent light and polite phrases and the steady breath of the HVAC. until everything feels like a customer service problem instead of a human moment. Even the police, after a while, start to drift toward closure. The older officer asked me again if I wanted to file a report. The younger officer stood slightly to the side, watching the clerk and the monitor like he was trying to decide which one was lying more. The clerk kept repeating the same words: protocol, management, internal, as if saying them enough times would make the missing master key vanish out of the world. I could feel my own voice growing sharper each time I spoke. I did not like that version of myself. I did not like being loud in public. I did not like being the problem, but the fear underneath it was worse than the shame, and the fear kept pushing up through my throat like pressure. Finally, the older officer took a step back and put on the tone people use when they are ending a conversation. "Here's what's going to happen," he said. "We'll document that you called. We'll advise the hotel to secure access. If you want to make a formal complaint, you can contact management. If you feel unsafe, you should leave." Leave. The word was permission. The only real permission I had received all night. "I'm leaving," I said immediately. The clerk's shoulders loosened in relief that he tried to hide. It was subtle, but it was there. Like my departure was the outcome he had been aiming for the entire time. Not my safety, not the truth, just my absence. He printed paperwork. The printer whined and spat out sheets, each page a thin, official sound in the lobby. He slid them across the counter and pointed where to sign. The forms were coldly normal. Dates, room numbers, a refund amount. A line that said something like guest dissatisfaction and did not have a category for someone stood at the foot of my bed and whispered a phrase like a command. My hands shook as I signed, not from cold, from the leftover adrenaline that still hadn't found a place to go. My signature looked wrong, like someone else's, like my own name didn't quite belong to me anymore. As I packed, the lobby tried to keep pretending. A family walked in with tired kids. The automatic doors whooshed open and shut, like lungs. A man in a ball cap asked the clerk about breakfast hours. The clerk answered in the same voice he had used for me, smooth and normal, and it made my stomach turn. The world was continuing in the same building that had just admitted it had lost a master key. I went back to my room with one of the officers behind me. Not as protection exactly, more as a witness. We walked down the hall, carpet swallowing steps, lights draining color from everything. My door opened with the keycard beep, perfectly obedient now. Inside, nothing looked disturbed. The bed was still made enough to seem untouched. The lamp sat where it should. The desk looked neat. My suitcase was still angled by the door where I had placed it. The keycard sleeve I had found earlier lay under the lamp like an artifact I had tried to pin down. The officer watched me throw my things into my bag. Shirts, charger, wallet, keys, fast and ugly, like I was evacuating. My hands kept expecting to brush against something that didn't belong, some trace of the woman, some proof she had been there. There was nothing. That emptiness was its own kind of proof. It told me this place didn't leave messes. It told me this place knew how to look normal again. I left the room with my bag slung over my shoulder, and the air in the hallway felt colder than it had before. When I handed the keycard back at the desk, the clerk dropped it into the tray without looking at it. The sound of plastic hitting plastic was soft, final. Outside, the parking lot lights buzzed in the damp air. The neon sign flickered again, vacancy stuttering like a nervous smile. The camera pole's red light blinked steadily as I walked to my car, recording a version of the night that would probably never play back correctly. I got in, shut the door, and locked it automatically, the way you do without thinking. For a second, I just sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, breathing hard. The interior smelled like old fast food and warm plastic. The windows fogged slightly at the edges. The officer's cruiser pulled out behind me and turned toward the street. Lights off now, business over. The hotel sat there quietly, lit and harmless looking from the outside, like it was waiting for the next person to decide they needed a quiet side. I drove. The roads were mostly empty, a few semis on the highway, a few cars at stoplights, red taillights hovering in the darkness. The radio stayed off. I did not want voices. I did not want noise that could hide another sound. By the time I reached my neighborhood, it was close to 3 in the morning. The streets were lined with sleeping houses and dark windows. My hands were still shaking on the wheel, not enough to make me lose control, just enough to remind me I was not okay. I pulled into my driveway and shut off the engine. The sudden silence made my ears ring. For a long moment, I sat there, staring at my own porch light. It was on, casting a small, warm circle on the steps. Everything looked normal. Everything looked like my life again. I reached into my pockets automatically, emptying them onto the passenger seat the way I do when I'm tired. Keys, change, receipts. I wanted nothing in my pockets when I went inside. I wanted to feel clean, as if I could strip the hotel off me like a coat. My fingers closed around a piece of plastic, a key card. I frowned, confused. I had returned my key card at the desk. I remembered the tray. I remembered the soft plastic sound. I remembered watching the clerk not look at it. This card was in my pocket anyway. I pulled it out and held it under the weak cabin light. The hotel logo was printed on it, same branding, same cheap corporate design. The surface was smooth and slightly warm, like it had been held recently. There was no paper sleeve with it, just the card itself. For a second, I told myself the obvious lie. Maybe it stuck to my wallet. Maybe it clung to my phone case. Maybe I accidentally grabbed it when I grabbed my receipts. Maybe the clerk gave me 2. Maybe I had forgotten. But my body rejected those explanations immediately. The way your body rejects food that's spoiled even if your mind tries to argue it's fine. Because I knew what it felt like to hand over proof. And I knew I hadn't picked this up. I flipped it over. The back was mostly blank, with a magnetic strip and fine print. But near the bottom, faint and shallow, there was a scratch mark, like someone had tested a pen that didn't write, pressing hard enough to leave a groove instead of ink. At first I couldn't read it. It was too light, too incomplete. I angled it toward the porch light shining through my windshield. The scratch caught the light in a thin silver line, and then the shapes became letters. Not the whole phrase, just a fragment. 3 words, faint as a breath. Let them in. I sat there in my dark car with that piece of plastic warming my fingertips, and the quiet around my house suddenly did not feel like home anymore. It felt like the pause a door makes before it opens. 4.1. Returning to normal, 1,050 words. Home looked the same. That was the first insult. The porch light cast its small, warm circle on the steps. The welcome mat was still crooked the way it always was. The front window reflected the street in a calm, sleepy way. And for a second, I could almost convince myself that everything that had happened was still trapped inside the hotel, like a bad dream that could not travel. When I opened the front door, the smell of my house hit me. Dish soap, a faint trace of laundry, the bland warmth of drywall and carpet. It was familiar enough to make my throat tighten. I stepped inside and locked the deadbolt without thinking. then locked it again because I could not remember if I had done it the first time. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen, steady and ordinary. The dishwasher was running, a soft sloshing sound behind its closed door, like water being poured into a container again and again. Somewhere outside, down the block, a dog barked once, sharp, territorial, and then went quiet. Farther away still, the thin hiss of traffic from the main road drifted through the night like a constant exhale. It was all exactly the same as it had been before I left for work that afternoon. The normal sounds were supposed to pull me back into myself. They were supposed to remind me that I knew this space, that it belonged to me, that I understood every creak and click in it. Instead, they made my skin crawl. Because those sounds were not comfort anymore. They were cover. They were what the world sounded like right before it decided to go quiet. I set my keys on the counter and listened to the metal clink. I watched the way my hands moved, a little shaky, and I hated myself for it. I was a grown man standing in his own kitchen at 3 a.m, trembling like he had seen something supernatural. I had not. I kept telling myself that. I had seen a failure, a missing master key, a system that had been left unsecured long enough for a stranger to wander into rooms like the building was a store and guests were just shelves. But the word failure did not fit the feeling. I went into the living room and turned on a lamp. The light made the familiar furniture look too sharp, like it had been waiting for me. My shoes squeaked on the floor once. The house made a settling pop from somewhere in the wall. Wood shifting, pipes cooling, something normal. It sounded like a tiny knock. My body flinched before my mind could correct it. I forced myself to breathe, slow and deliberate, like I was calming an animal. I did not wake my wife. I did not want to step into that conversation at 3 a.m. with my eyes wide and my voice thin. I did not want to explain a hotel break-in and then add, by the way, I found a key card in my pocket with a scratched message on it. I could already hear how it would sound in her tired, irritated ears. So I carried the story alone. In the kitchen, I emptied my pockets again. Wallet, receipts, change. The key card sat on the counter under the light like a piece of trash that had somehow become heavy. I stared at it, then I picked it up and flipped it over again, as if the letters might have disappeared. They hadn't. The scratches were still there, faint and shallow. Let them in. I told myself it was a prank, a random card that someone had scuffed absent-mindedly, a coincidence. But the warmth of it in my pocket, the fact that it was in my pocket at all, sat in my mind like a stone. I did the most cowardly, practical thing I could think of. I hid it. There was a junk drawer in the kitchen that held batteries, old takeout menus, a roll of tape, rubber bands, a screwdriver I never used. I slid the key card under a stack of coupons and closed the drawer gently, like I was putting something fragile to sleep. Then I put my hand on the drawer front and held it there for a second, feeling the cheap wood vibrate faintly with the fridge hum. It was ridiculous. It was a child's logic. If I cannot see it, it cannot follow me. I went to the bathroom, brushed my teeth, rinsed my mouth. The water ran and stopped. Pipes ticked as they cooled. The sound made me think of the hotel's ice machine clattering in the hall like a laugh, and my stomach tightened again. I climbed into bed carefully, trying not to wake my wife. She shifted once and sighed, half asleep, and the normal intimacy of that sound, someone breathing beside you, almost made me cry. Not from relief, from exhaustion. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening. That was the change. Before, I would have fallen asleep to the house's noises the way you fall asleep to rain, letting it fade into the background. Now every little sound registered like a message. The refrigerator compressor cycling on, the AC vent whispering as it pushed cool air down the hall, the floor creaking in a spot that always creaked, the distant traffic sighing on the road. I waited for the moment the sounds would thin. I waited for the moment the house would hold its breath, and that waiting kept me awake longer than the fear did. In the days that followed, I tried to act normal. I went to work. I answered emails. I talked about schedules and grocery lists. I even apologized to my wife in the careful way you apologize when you are not sure which part of the argument you are actually apologizing for. But the quiet had changed shape inside me. Quiet used to mean peace. Now it felt like a trap door. In the warehouse, when the conveyor belt shut down for maintenance and the building dropped into sudden hush, my skin prickled. At home, when the dishwasher finished its cycle and the kitchen went still, my chest tightened. I started leaving the TV on low at night, not because I wanted to watch, but because I wanted the sound to pin the world in place. One evening, about a week later, I was alone in the kitchen making something simple, microwaving leftovers, half listening to the TV in the living room. The house was settling into its normal night rhythm. The fridge hummed. The AC whispered. A car passed on the street outside. I opened the microwave and a warm, stale smell rose up. I set the plate on the counter and reached for a fork. And then I heard it, a soft, precise beep. Not the microwave, not my phone, not the smoke detector. The beep came from the direction of the back door, near the handle. It was clean and bright and instantly recognizable, as if a hotel lock had accepted a card. For a second, my brain refused it. My mind searched for a reasonable device, a reasonable source. There was nothing in my kitchen that should make that sound. The fridge hummed. The TV murmured. The AC breathed. And beneath all of it, that beep lingered in the air like a fingerprint you can't wipe away. I stood completely still, fork halfway to my hand, listening to my own house as if it no longer belonged to me. 4. 2. The first knock at home. 1,050 words. The first time it happened at home, it was small enough that I could almost forgive myself for noticing. That is the dangerous part about a new fear. It does not announce itself with sirens. It arrives as something you could explain away if you wanted to keep living your life. It was a weekday evening, not late. The kind of time when the world is still active but tired. Dinner smells drifting from other houses, a few cars passing, porch lights beginning to switch on one by one down the street. My wife was out running errands. I was alone, moving through the kitchen in that half-autopilot way, reheating food, rinsing a dish, wiping the counter because I could not sit still. The TV was on in the living room, volume low, just noise. A human voice to keep the house from becoming too quiet. The beep I had heard a minute earlier still sat in my head like a splinter. I tried to pull it out with logic. Maybe it was the microwave doing something weird. Maybe the fridge made a sound at the exact wrong moment. Maybe my phone had pinged and I misheard the tone. Maybe the neighbor's car alarm chirped once. There are 1,000 electronic sounds in a neighborhood, and a tired brain can stitch them together into whatever shape it fears most. I told myself that. I even laughed once out loud, as if mocking the idea would shrink it. Then there were 2 taps on the front door. Not a pounding, not an urgent knock, not the aggressive rattle of someone trying to wake you. 2 polite taps. Tap, tap. The sound was soft enough that if the TV had been louder, I might not have heard it. But the TV was low on purpose, and the house was listening with me now, and the taps landed on the wood like a pair of fingertips testing a surface. I froze with a plate in my hand. For a second, I did not move at all, because part of my brain still expected the world to return to normal if I stayed still. The refrigerator hummed. The AC vent whispered. The TV continued to talk quietly, oblivious. Tap, tap. No voice followed. No delivery, no hello, no car door outside, no footsteps on the porch. I set the plate down slowly, the ceramic clink loud in my ears, and walked toward the front door. The air in the entryway felt cooler. The porch light outside cast a faint glow through the peephole, making the lens look like a small eye embedded in the door. I leaned in and looked. The porch was empty. The light shone down on the steps and the welcome mat. The railing cast a clean shadow. The street beyond was quiet. No person standing close. No silhouette at the edge of the porch, nothing. I blinked and looked again, pressing my eye harder to the peephole as if I could force the view to become more detailed. My breath fogged the glass slightly from the inside and made the porch blur for a second. Still nothing. The rational part of me loosened. A neighbor kid could have run off. Someone could have knocked on the wrong door and realized it. A branch could have tapped against the door frame with a gust of wind. The house could have made a settling pop that sounded like a knock because my nerves were already stretched thin. I stepped back and listened. Silence. No retreating footsteps. No car starting. No gravel crunch. My heart continued to beat fast, but it started to feel stupid. I could feel the embarrassment forming already, that familiar shame of reacting too hard to a small sound. I reached for my phone, because my phone had become my new comfort object. Proof machine. Witness. If anything happened, I could record. I could show. I could say, I'm not crazy. I opened the camera app and pointed it at the door, at the peephole area, like that would somehow capture what my eyes couldn't. The screen lit up. For half a second, the image glitched. Not a dramatic glitch, just a quick smear of pixels, like the camera couldn't decide what it was seeing. The screen briefly showed the porch in a washed-out blur. Then it snapped into focus. Empty porch. Empty steps. The same warm circle of porch light. Nothing. I frowned and moved the phone slightly, panning from the peephole to the window beside the door, trying to catch a reflection, trying to catch movement. The video stayed steady now. The street looked normal. The neighbor's mailbox sat where it always did. A car passed at the end of the block, headlights briefly sweeping the pavement, then vanishing. I lowered the phone. The rational part of me took advantage of the moment and surged forward, eager to reclaim territory. Plumbing, I thought. Pipes can knock. Heating systems click. Electronics make sounds. Houses settle. People knock and leave. These are all normal facts. I repeated them in my head like a list, like a prayer. I went back to the kitchen and forced myself to finish reheating the food. I moved loudly on purpose, opening cabinets, letting the microwave door close with a firm clunk, running the faucet for a few seconds. I wanted the house to sound lived in again. I wanted to drown out the small, careful noises that my mind was now trained to fear. By the time my wife came home, I had almost convinced myself it was nothing. Almost. We talked about normal things, her errands, a bill that needed paying, a package we were expecting. I nodded at the right moments. I laughed once. I chewed food without tasting it. Later, when she went upstairs to shower, I stayed in the kitchen under the warm light, loading the dishwasher. The house made its gentle night sounds. The street outside quieted down. The refrigerator compressor clicked off and then on again. And for a brief moment, I felt my body relax. That was the drop, the exhale after tension. I remember it clearly because it lasted only a few seconds. Then the beep came again. This time it was not from the back door area. It was closer. Closer to the front of the house. Closer to where I stood. A clean, precise beep, soft but undeniable, like a card reader accepting input. I stopped with a fork in my hand. The fork hovered over the open dishwasher like a question mark. The TV in the living room murmured. Water dripped once from the faucet into the sink. The AC vent whispered. And in the entryway, just beyond the kitchen, the beep seemed to hang in the air for a moment, as if the sound itself had walked a few steps forward. My stomach went cold. I held my breath without meaning to, listening for the next part. The click, the latch, the door moving. Nothing happened. Not yet. But the way the beep repeated, and the way it sounded closer, made one thought settle into my mind with slow, deliberate certainty. Whatever had followed me home was not trying to break in loudly. It was practicing. It was learning how quiet my life could get before I noticed. 4.3. The keycard that moves. 1,100 words. After the second beep, I did what I always do when my fear starts to feel stupid. I looked for something physical. A sound can be argued with. A sound can be misheard. A sound can be blamed on plumbing or power lines or a neighbor's electronics. But an object in the wrong place is harder to negotiate with. An object is either where you left it or it isn't. That night, after my wife was asleep and the house had dropped into its late-hour quiet, I went to the kitchen drawer where I had hidden the keycard. I did not announce what I was doing. I did not turn on extra lights. I moved the way you move when you are trying not to wake someone. Except I wasn't worried about waking my wife as much as I was worried about what I might find. The kitchen was dim, lit only by the stove clock and the faint spill of light from the hallway. The refrigerator hummed. The AC vent whispered softly. The dishwasher had finished its cycle and sat silent, full of clean dishes like a sealed mouth. I opened the junk drawer. The drawer slid out with a soft wooden rasp. The smell of old paper and metal rose up. Batteries, tape, takeout menus, loose screws. I shifted things carefully, feeling with my fingertips. The keycard wasn't there. At first, I assumed I was simply missing it. I pushed aside a stack of coupons, moved a roll of tape, lifted a handful of rubber bands. The drawer felt too shallow, too honest to hide anything without my noticing. I slid my hand along the bottom, checking corners, checking under the battery pack. Nothing. I stared down into the drawer until my eyes started to sting. The stove clock read 1:12 a.m. The numbers looked too bright against the dark kitchen. I closed the drawer slowly and stood still, letting my mind catch up. Maybe I had moved it. Maybe I had taken it out earlier to show my wife and then chickened out. Maybe it was in my wallet. Maybe it was in my car again. There were normal explanations. There had to be normal explanations. But I could picture the moment I hid it too clearly. The card under the coupons. The drawer sliding shut. My hand resting on the wood, as if I was sealing something in. I turned on the overhead kitchen light, and the room snapped into a harsh, flat brightness. Shadows retreated into corners. The ordinary mess of the day was suddenly visible. Mail on the counter, a dish towel draped over the sink, a crumb trail near the toaster. I searched like a person trying to prove their own sanity. I checked the counter first, then the desk area where we kept bills, then the side table by the couch, then the bathroom counter, then the pockets of the jacket I'd worn that night, then my car keys, my wallet, my phone case, anything that could have held a thin strip of plastic. I even opened the trash can and stared at the top layer, because my brain was willing to accuse me of throwing it away without remembering. Still nothing. The house made its normal noises around me, almost politely, as if it was trying to reassure me. Pipes ticked softly as water cooled. The fridge compressor clicked. Somewhere outside, a car passed slowly, tires whispering on pavement. By the time I went back upstairs, my hands were shaking with a different kind of fear, the fear of not being able to trust your own actions. I slept, but only lightly. It wasn't the kind of sleep where you sink and disappear. It was the kind where you float just above waking, ears trained to small details. I woke a few times to tiny clicks that could have been anything. The house settling, the AC cycling, a distant branch shifting against a window. Each time I lay still and listened until the sound stopped, and each time I told myself I would check in the morning. In the morning, sunlight made me feel stupid again. The kitchen looked normal in daylight. The coffee maker sat on the counter. The microwave displayed a green digital clock. A cereal bowl sat in the sink from last night. My wife moved through her routine, tired and annoyed in the ordinary ways. I was halfway through making coffee when I saw it. On top of the microwave, centered like a place marker, was the hotel keycard. It sat perfectly flat against the black surface, the logo facing up as if someone wanted it recognized. The plastic caught a strip of morning light and reflected it cleanly. It looked new. It looked intentional. For a moment, I just stared, cup in hand, feeling my mouth go dry. There was no reason for it to be there. Not I forgot. Not it fell. Not it stuck to something. The top of the microwave was not a place a card falls accidentally. It was too high, too clean, too deliberate. I did not touch it right away. My brain did that ridiculous thing where it tries to keep the moment suspended. Like if I don't touch it, I can still pretend it's a trick of vision. My wife walked into the kitchen and glanced around, half awake. "What's that?" she asked casually. The question snapped the moment in half. I reached up and grabbed the card quickly, too quickly, like a kid hiding something before a parent notices. "Nothing," I said. "Just something from work." It was the worst lie, because it wasn't even shaped like truth. But she didn't press. She took her coffee and moved on, because normal life has a way of stepping around your private panic. I slid the key card into my pocket and felt the plastic warm against my thigh like it was alive. That day, I couldn't focus at work. The warehouse noise, usually so numbing, felt too loud. Every time a conveyor shut off and the building fell into a brief hush, my skin prickled. Every time my phone buzzed, I expected a beep instead of a notification. That night, I checked the locks before bed. Twice. 3 times. I started sleeping lightly again, the same way I had slept at the hotel, as if my home had become a room I was borrowing. I would wake to tiny clicks, small mechanical sounds that might have been the door settling, might have been the deadbolt, might have been nothing at all. I would stare at the ceiling and listen until my eyes burned. After a few nights like that, I stopped arguing with myself. I went to the front door in the late afternoon while my wife was out and knelt down to look at the frame. The strike plate, the little metal piece where the latch sits, had a thin scuff along its edge. Fresh, bright against the duller metal. Not deep enough to gouge, but clean enough to show it hadn't been there long. It looked like something smooth and hard had been slid along it, like plastic, like a card. I ran my fingertip over the mark, feeling the slight roughness, and a cold certainty settled into me. The beeps I'd heard were not memories. They were practice. And whatever had found its way out of that hotel did not need to break my door down. It only needed the same quiet patience that had held my hotel door open a few inches. Listening, waiting for the moment my life got quiet enough to open on its own. 5.1. Research like a desperate adult. 1,050 words. I did not become a detective. That is important, because people like to imagine fear turning someone into a hero. They like to imagine a man getting obsessed, pinning photos to a wall, connecting dots with string, breaking the case wide open in the glow of a laptop at 2 a.m. That is not what happened. What happened was uglier and smaller. I became tired. I became suspicious of my own ears. I became the kind of person who needed a stranger on the internet to confirm that I was not making it all up. The keycard stayed in my pocket for 2 days after I found it on the microwave, like I was afraid to put it anywhere else. I hated how it felt against my leg when I walked. I hated how warm it got, like it belonged to my body now. Eventually, I slid it into an envelope, sealed it with tape, and hid it in the same junk drawer again. Under batteries this time. Under something heavy. I told myself I would know if it moved again, but I did not trust myself the way I used to. So I started searching. Not the dramatic kind of searching, the kind you do during lunch breaks and late nights when your wife is asleep and you are sitting at the kitchen table with a dim lamp on, pretending you are paying bills. The kind you do with one eye on the hallway, listening for a beep that your brain is now trained to recognize in any electronic noise. I typed the hotel name into Google, then the address, then combinations of words that felt ridiculous even as I typed them. Suites, plus master key. Suites, plus lock beep. Suites, plus entered my room. St. Louis, plus hotel employee keycard. I moved from official-looking pages to the less official ones, because the official ones never say anything you need. The hotel's own site was a polished lie. Photos of smiling families by a pool, bullet points about breakfast and Wi-Fi, a paragraph about comfort and convenience. The reviews were where the real air leaked out. Most of them were normal complaints. Beds too firm, shower water lukewarm, noise from the highway, a smell in the hallway. People arguing about whether the breakfast waffles were real. The kind of petty human stuff that makes you almost feel safe, because it proves the building is mostly just a building. Then I found the reviews that made my stomach tighten. They were vague, almost careful, as if the writers didn't want to accuse the place of something specific. Short sentences, strange wording. Front desk was weird. Felt like they wanted me gone. Lock was acting up. Had to get new cards twice. Halls felt wrong at night. Hard to explain. Staff came by too late. Do not disturb did not matter. Something off about the quiet side. Quiet side. Seeing those words in someone else's text made my skin prickle. It wasn't proof, not really. It was just language. But it was the same language. The same phrase the clerk had said with that too-practiced smile. I clicked on the profiles of the reviewers. Most were anonymous. One had posted only that single review, which made it feel less like a chronic complainer and more like someone who had needed to warn people. Still, nothing was definitive. Nothing said, "A woman stood at the foot of my bed whispering a phrase." Nothing said, "A master key went missing and nobody told guests." The internet is full of noise, and I could feel myself getting lost in it, chasing a truth that refused to show its face. So I tried another angle. Police blotter. That word felt dramatic and old-fashioned, but I searched for it anyway. I looked for public reports in the area. I searched for phrases like hotel disturbance, unauthorized entry, key card, trespass. Most of what I found was either too general or hidden behind paywalls, or written in cold language that turned everything into incident occurred and subject advised. Nothing I could hold. Nothing I could show my wife and say, "See, this is real." The more I searched, the more I started to feel the shame creep in. The fear began to look like obsession in the glow of my laptop screen. I told myself to stop. I told myself I was feeding it. And then I called the hotel. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in my car on my break, parked under the shade of a warehouse awning. The heat outside made the air inside my car smell like plastic. My hands were sweaty on the phone. The line rang, and a cheerful recorded voice came on, all corporate friendliness. "Thank you for calling." Then music, thin, tinny, looping. A woman answered after a minute. I asked to speak to the manager. She said the manager wasn't available. I asked when they would be. She said she couldn't say. I gave my name. I told her I had been there last week. I told her there had been an incident involving unauthorized room access. I tried to keep my voice calm, professional, like an adult asking about billing. She transferred me. The line clicked. Then the music started again. Another person answered. I repeated myself. They said they would take a message. I asked if the missing master key had been recovered. Silence. Then a careful answer. I'm not sure what you mean. I felt my anger rise. I mean the master access card you said was missing, I said. The person's voice cooled immediately. Sir, I can't help you with that, they said. Put me through to someone who can. One more transfer. Music again, then voicemail. Please leave your name, number, and reason for calling. I left a message, short, controlled. I said I needed a callback about a security incident and my refund paperwork. I did not mention the woman. I did not mention the phrase. I did not mention the scratched words. I tried to sound like a normal problem a hotel could solve. No one called me back. When I called again the next day, I got the same loop, the same transfers, the same music that made time feel sticky, the same polite stonewalling, as if the building itself had learned how to redirect fear until it ran out of momentum. That was when I stopped looking for official validation and started reaching out through weaker connections. The kind of connections adults use when they do not know what else to do. A coworker of mine knew someone who had worked in hospitality. He gave me a number with a shrug, like it was probably nothing. I stared at the number for an hour before I called, because calling meant I was admitting I needed help. When the person answered, she sounded younger than I expected. Mid-20s, maybe. The background noise suggested she was outside, wind and traffic. I explained in broad strokes. Hotel, unauthorized entry, keycard issues, staff acting strange. I tried to keep it vague because saying it clearly made it sound insane. She listened without interrupting. Then she exhaled, and the sound of it through the phone made my stomach tighten. What hotel did you say? She asked. I told her. There was a pause on the line. Not a surprised pause, a knowing one. I do not work there anymore, she said carefully. But people used to call it the quiet side. My throat went tight. They told me that, I said. Quiet side. She hesitated again, and I could hear her choosing her words, the way someone chooses words when they do not want to get sued. It's the side they do not fully reset, she said. Reset? I repeated. Locks, she said. Keycard systems. Sometimes they do a full reprogram, sometimes they do not. Depends on who is working and what management wants to pay for. Her voice dropped slightly. It's not haunted. It's managed. Managed. The word hit me harder than haunted ever could have. Because haunted is a story. Haunted is a mystery you can distance yourself from. Managed means someone decided. I sat there in my hot car, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the highway hiss beyond the warehouse, and I felt the shape of my fear change again. It was not the supernatural that scared me. It was the idea that the quiet side existed because the hotel had learned how to keep problems quiet, and I had checked into it like it was a perk. 5, 2. Back to the hotel area. 1:50 words. Daylight made me brave in the dumbest way. It did not make me fearless. It just made the fear feel negotiable. Like the darkness had been the problem, not the building. Like if I drove back when the sun was up and people were moving around, the whole thing would shrink into something ordinary. A misunderstanding, a bad employee, a broken lock. A story I could file away in my head as that weird night and never touch again. So on my next day off, I got in my car and drove back. The sky was bright and empty, the kind of Midwest blue that looks like it has been scrubbed clean. The roads were busy with normal life. Delivery trucks, moms in SUVs, men in work vans. I turned the radio on for a few minutes, then turned it off because the voices made me feel boxed in. I wanted to hear the world without commentary. I wanted my ears to decide what was real. As I got closer to the hotel area, I felt my shoulders tighten without permission. The highway hiss grew louder. The familiar exits and signs reappeared like landmarks in a nightmare you recognize even when you do not want to. I took the same exit as before. In daylight, everything looked harmless. The cluster of fast food places looked like a tired strip mall. The gas stations looked clean. The road into the hotel lot was bordered by bright grass and a shallow ditch that glittered with a little leftover water. The hotel sign was still there, still advertising suites, but the neon flicker was less dramatic in the sun. Vacancy glowed like a joke now, not a warning. The building itself looked almost friendly. Beige siding, clean windows, a few planters near the entrance. Nothing about it screamed danger. Nothing about it carried the weight of what I had felt in that lobby at midnight. That normalness made my stomach turn, because it meant the building did not need darkness to do what it did. It did not need to be scary. It could be plain. It could be the kind of place you would recommend to someone's aunt. It could be the kind of place a tired family checked into without thinking. I pulled into the parking lot and chose a spot where I could see the entrance doors and part of the lobby through the glass. I did not park too close. I did not want to be obvious. I wanted to watch without being watched. The security camera pole was still there at the far end of the lot. In sunlight, the red blinking light was invisible, but the camera itself sat angled down, patient and indifferent. It looked like the kind of thing people point to when they want to feel safe. I sat in my car with the engine off. At first, all I heard was the normal daytime noise. Cars passing on the road, a distant horn, the faint rush of the highway. Then my ears started to pick up the hotel's sounds. An AC compressor kicked on somewhere behind the building with a low roar, like a heavy animal clearing its throat. The sound ran for a while, then eased down, then came back again. There was a steady, mechanical rhythm to it that reminded me of the metronome AC in my safer room. A side door opened and shut. Somewhere, a cart rolled over pavement, its wheels making a repetitive rattle that echoed off the building's walls. The sound was strangely cheerful in the sun, like the hotel was just doing its job. Somebody pushed a luggage cart toward a car. A child ran a few steps after a parent, trailing behind like a loose thought. The entrance doors slid open and shut with that smooth, automatic whoosh. Each time they opened, I could see a slice of the lobby, tile floor, coffee station, the faint glow of the TV. A person with a backpack walked in, paused at the desk, leaned forward. Another person walked out carrying a plastic bag of ice, shoulders hunched against the heat. They all looked normal. Staff moved in the background, sometimes visible through the glass, sometimes not. A woman in a housekeeping uniform crossed behind the desk with folded towels. A man in a polo shirt carried something that looked like paperwork. Guests came and went in waves, the way people do at a mid-range hotel in the afternoon. Checkouts, check-ins, lunch runs, pool trips. I watched for patterns, and I hated myself for watching. I watched how long the front desk clerk looked at each guest. I watched whether they smiled. I watched whether they glanced at the security monitor. I watched whether anyone used a radio. I watched who went toward which hallway. It was not detective work. It was an exhausted adult trying to locate the edge of his own paranoia. At one point, I saw a housekeeping cart being pushed down a side path toward a service entrance. The cart wheels clacked as they hit a crack in the pavement. The sound made me think of the ice machine clattering in the hall like teeth. A siren wailed somewhere in the distance, rising and fading as an ambulance moved through traffic. The sound made my chest tighten, not because it was scary, but because it reminded me of the police lights reflecting on the lobby glass that night. How quickly the whole thing had shifted into procedure and then back into normal. I sat there for almost an hour. The longer I watched, the more I realized something that felt awful in its simplicity. Nothing about the hotel's daytime behavior contradicted what had happened. It did not need to. The building did not have to show its teeth in the sun. It could wear its normal face and still have a quiet side, still have systems that could be managed, still have protocols that prioritized silence over safety. Eventually, my legs started to cramp from sitting. My palms were sweaty on the steering wheel, even though the air outside was warm and bright. I looked at the entrance doors one more time, watching them slide open for a couple dragging a suitcase, watching the lobby swallow them whole. Then I did something I had not expected. I rolled down my window slightly, not because I needed air, but because I wanted to hear the building more clearly. The sounds came in sharper. The cartwheels, the AC roar, the soft slap of someone's flip-flops on pavement, the automatic doors whooshing open and shut like lungs. The hotel sounded alive. It sounded normal. And sitting there in the daylight, listening to it breathe, I realized why the quiet side scared me more than any haunted story ever could. Because in the sun, it did not look like a place that had made a mistake. It looked like a place that had learned how to keep making the same mistake. Quietly. 5.3, contagion phrase, 100 words. I stayed longer than I meant to. At some point, the line between watching for reassurance and watching, because I could not stop, blurred into something ugly. I had told myself I was here to prove the night was just a system failure, a one-off. But sitting in the parking lot, staring at the same glass doors, I began to feel like I was waiting for the building to confess. The sun moved across the hood of my car. Heat gathered under the windshield. The air conditioning compressor behind the hotel roared and eased down in slow cycles. A luggage cart rattled over a seam in the pavement again and again, as if the hotel was replaying a sound to see if I reacted. I finally got out, not with confidence, with that cautious, embarrassed determination people get when they know they have been sitting in a car too long and they need to act like a normal adult again. I walked toward the entrance with my hands in my pockets, pretending I had a reason to be there. As I got closer, the automatic doors slid open with their smooth whoosh, and a cool breath of conditioned air came out to meet me. The lobby looked exactly as it had before. Same detergent and damp carpet smell. Same silent TV captions crawling under a smiling anchor. Same brochure stand promising historic downtown, like the hotel had anything to do with history. In daylight, the out-of-focus feeling was gone. It was all clean angles and soft corporate lighting. It almost made me angry. It was like the building was mocking my memory with its normalness. A couple stood at the desk, checking in. A man in a ball cap argued politely about his reservation. A child swung a plastic bag of ice and laughed. The front desk clerk, different person than the night before, younger with a bright smile, nodded and typed and said all the correct things. I moved to the side near the coffee station and pretended to read the brochures. My eyes kept flicking to the security monitor on the counter. From this angle, I could see it more clearly. The feeds were steadier in the day, but the elevator camera still had a strange lag, like the motion wasn't quite continuous. A person crossed the frame and the image stuttered, then caught up. I told myself it was cheap equipment. I told myself it meant nothing. I poured myself a coffee I did not want, mostly to give my hands something to do. The coffee smelled burnt and thin. The paper cup felt too soft. The lid snapped on with a small click that reminded me of plastic against metal, keys tapping, a card ticking like a tiny clock. I stood there sipping hot bitterness and listening. The lobby had its own soundscape in the day. Shoes on tile, a suitcase wheel squeaking, the soft clack of the printer, the hiss of the coffee warmer, the HVAC breathing steadily overhead, filling every pause so no one could hear true silence. 2 employees crossed behind the desk. One carried towels, one carried a stack of papers. Someone laughed at something on a phone. Someone coughed. Someone asked where the pool was. Normal noise. Normal life. Then I heard the phrase. It was not shouted. It was not even clearly directed at anyone. It slipped into the lobby sound the way a wrong note slips into music. You have to let them in. For half a second, my brain refused it. I felt my chest tighten before I had even processed the words, as if my body recognized the pattern faster than my mind could. I turned slowly toward the source, coffee cup trembling slightly in my hand. A woman was standing near the vending machines by the hallway, mid-30s maybe, hair pulled into a messy bun, one hand on her phone. She was facing away from me slightly, shoulders hunched, speaking in a low voice like she was trying to keep her conversation private. She did not look like housekeeping. She did not look like staff. She looked like a guest who had been on the road too long. "You have to let them in," she repeated, softer this time, as if she was quoting someone or talking herself through something. Her tone carried stress, not menace, like she was pleading with someone on the other end of the line. "No, I'm serious. You have to let them in." I stood there, frozen, watching her. 100 rational explanations rushed forward like a crowd. Maybe she was talking about a delivery. Maybe she was talking about family. Maybe she had kids locked out of a room. Maybe it was a phrase from some argument she was replaying. But the words were too clean, too exact. The same phrasing, the same rhythm. And suddenly the phrase stopped feeling like the madness of one old woman in a wrinkled uniform. It felt like a script, like something people picked up and repeated without knowing where it came from. The woman near the vending machines turned slightly, and I caught a glimpse of her face. Tired eyes, jaw clenched, the look of someone trying to manage a minor crisis. She did not look at me. She did not seem aware of me at all. That made it worse. If she had looked at me, if she had smirked, if she had seemed connected to the night, I could have framed it as intentional. A trick, a setup, a targeted thing. But she looked ordinary. She looked like any exhausted traveler with a phone pressed to her ear, which meant the phrase did not require a specific person. It could travel. My mind flashed an image of the old woman from my room. Her wide eyes, the crooked collar, the key ring ticking like a clock. The image was so sharp, it almost felt like she was standing between the coffee station and the brochure rack. I blinked hard. She wasn't there. Of course she wasn't. In daylight, the lobby offered no obvious ghosts, only the memory of one, and the threat that memory could be contagious. I tried to do something practical. I tried to anchor myself. I looked for a name tag on the woman's shirt. None. I looked for staff watching her. None. I listened for any mention of housekeeping, lockouts, anything that would make her words fit the room. Nothing. Her call ended abruptly. She shoved the phone into her pocket and walked toward the hallway without looking around, disappearing into the corridor like a thought you can't catch once it leaves. I stood there for another minute, coffee cooling in my hands, and I realized I had stopped breathing normally. My breaths were shallow, cautious, like I was afraid to make enough noise to trigger something. I put the coffee down in the trash without finishing it and walked toward the exit, not fast, but with the stiff control of someone trying not to run. As I approached the automatic doors, they opened. But they opened a fraction early, not when I reached the sensor line, not when my body crossed the usual invisible threshold. A split second before, as if the glass had recognized me from farther away than it should have. The doors whooshed apart, and cold air spilled out toward me like a greeting. I paused, one foot still inside on the tile, one foot almost on the entry mat, and the feeling that hit me was irrational and immediate. It was not opening because I was there. It was opening because it knew I had come back. I stepped through anyway, because staying felt worse than leaving. The doors slid shut behind me with the same smooth corporate sound, sealing the lobby back into its clean daylight lie. Outside, the parking lot heat hit my face. Traffic hissed on the highway. A siren wailed somewhere far away and faded. I walked to my car with my shoulders tight and my jaw clenched, carrying a new kind of fear. Not fear of one person, fear of a phrase that could spread quietly, the way the hotel's mistakes spread quietly, until you heard it in a bright lobby at noon, and it still made your blood run cold. 6.1. Setting traps at home. 1,050 words. After the hotel, I stopped trusting comfort and started trusting friction. Not courage, not instincts, not the idea that I would feel danger coming. I wanted proof that did not depend on my nerves. I wanted something that would click, record, light up. Something that would make the night behave like a math problem instead of a superstition. So I bought cheap security, not the sleek professional system people post about online. The tired, embarrassed kind. A door chime from a big box store. A second camera that claimed it could see in the dark. A little motion sensor meant for a hallway. The kind that chirps when someone walks past it so you do not trip over a dog at night. I set it up on a Saturday afternoon while my wife was out. I did not tell her exactly what I was doing. I said something vague about upgrading the camera. She rolled her eyes and let me have my project, because we were still in that uneasy post-argument phase where we were both trying not to start another fight. The packaging made everything look confident. Smiling families, clean homes, big words like smart and secure. I unboxed it at the kitchen table like I was assembling a fragile religion. The first device was the door chime. 2 small pieces of plastic, one for the door frame, one for the door itself. Peel and stick adhesive, simple as a toy. The instructions promised a bright notification sound whenever the door opened. When I turned it on, it made a setup beep, short, flat, cheap, beep, beep. I flinched anyway. Not because it sounded like the hotel, it didn't. The chime's beep was the kind of sound that belongs to a gadget, a squeaky little confirmation. The hotel beep had been different. Cleaner, tighter, somehow more confident, like it belonged to a system that expected obedience. I installed the door chime anyway, pressing the adhesive hard, holding it in place like my thumb could force safety into the wood. Then I tested it by opening the door an inch. The chime chirped. A bright little sound that made me feel stupid and relieved at the same time. Next came the camera. I already had a basic doorbell cam, but I wanted another angle, something inside, looking at the entryway and the hall. I mounted it on a shelf facing the front door and the narrow corridor leading to the bedrooms. I plugged it in and watched the tiny lens blink to life. It made another setup noise, a different beep, and a robotic voice announced it was ready. The language was too cheerful. I spent 20 minutes adjusting the angle, stepping back, checking the phone feed, stepping forward again. I wanted the door, the lock, the floor, the exact stretch of space where a person would have to move if they entered. I wanted to remove the possibility of maybe I missed it. Then I added the motion sensor halfway down the hall. It was meant to be helpful, a simple little device that chirped when motion passed. I set it at knee height and tested it by walking past. Chirp, chirp. Not a beep, a chirp, like a bird, like a toy. I hated that it sounded harmless. Still, when I looked at the entryway with all 3 devices installed, the camera lens staring, the door chime waiting, the motion sensor pointed down the hallway, I felt the first hint of control I'd had since that night. Not peace. Control. The last part of my plan was the key card. The key card was the thing I could not rationalize away. It was the object that kept slipping out of my explanations like a fish. It had appeared in my pocket. It had appeared on top of the microwave like a display. It had left a scuff on my strike plate like a signature. So I treated it like evidence. I found a small, clear plastic bag in the kitchen, one of those zip bags you use for sandwiches. I slid the key card inside and pushed the air out slowly, as if air itself could contaminate it. I sealed the zipper. Then I wrapped tape around the seal so the zipper could not be opened without tearing. I took a marker and drew a thick line across the tape and onto the plastic bag, a crude tamper mark. I wrote the date. I wrote the time. I wrote my initials like I was a cop on a TV show, and the act made me feel ridiculous and desperate. I placed the bag on the kitchen counter and stared at it. A sealed piece of plastic, a line of ink, a little human attempt at certainty. If it moves, I told myself out loud, because I needed to hear the logic in the air. I will know. If it moves, I will know. If it beeps, I will record. I placed the sealed bag in the junk drawer again, this time in a specific spot, oriented carefully like I was arranging an experiment. I took a photo of it on my phone, the bag's position relative to the batteries and the tape roll, so I could not argue with my own memory later. Then I closed the drawer and tested the door chime again, opened and shut, listened to the chirp. I walked past the motion sensor and listened to its polite little noise. I watched the camera feed on my phone and confirmed it was recording. That night, when my wife went to bed, I stayed up for a while in the living room, the TV on low. I kept my phone face up on the coffee table, volume high, waiting for the devices to alert me. The house settled and popped softly. The AC vent whispered. The refrigerator hummed. I tried to distinguish sounds the way you learn to distinguish accents. The door chime beep was cheap and double-toned. The motion sensor chirp was soft and bird-like. The camera had its own little electronic ticks when it switched modes, and the hotel beep, my brain insisted, was something else entirely. Cleaner, more precise, a sound that belonged to a lock, not a toy. I finally drifted off on the couch around midnight. Not deep sleep, the kind of sleep where your body rests but your ears stay half awake, waiting for an alarm. At some point I woke and went to bed, moving quietly so I would not wake my wife. The devices stayed silent. No chirps, no alerts. That made me feel both relieved and uneasy. Because if nothing happened, then what was I preparing for? I slept, and the night passed in pieces. When morning came, sunlight pooled in the kitchen. I walked to the junk drawer immediately, like a man checking a wound. The sealed bag was still there. The tape was intact, the marker line unbroken, the bag in the same position as my photo. For a moment, relief loosened my chest. Then my phone vibrated, a notification from the camera app. Sound detected. Not motion, sound. I frowned and opened the clip. The video showed the entryway exactly as it had been all night. Empty hall, closed door, no movement. The timestamp in the corner read 3:17 a.m. The infrared view made everything look pale and ghostly, but nothing changed. No shadow crossed. No door opened. No person appeared. I turned the volume up and listened to the audio. At first, there was only the normal night noise. Soft HVAC breath, a distant car passing, the faint tick of the house settling. Then, clear as if it had happened inches from the microphone, came a single sound. A clean, precise beep. One beep. Not the door chime. Not the motion sensor. Not my phone. The same kind of beep that had opened a hotel door. The clip ended without anything else happening. No click. No voices. No footsteps. Just that one beep, captured in perfect digital clarity at 3:17 a.m., paired with footage of an empty hallway. And in that moment, I understood the cruelest part of what I had been trying to do. The camera did not make me safer. It only proved that whatever was happening did not need to appear to be real. 6.2. The worst kind of proof. 150 words. I listened to the beep until it stopped sounding like a sound. It became a shape, a small bright point in time that my mind kept circling like a sore tooth. The clip was only a few seconds long, and I played it again and again in the kitchen with the morning light coming in, as if daylight could disinfect it. Beep. A clean tone. Not loud, not dramatic, just precise. I held my phone closer to my ear. I turned the volume up. I played it through a speaker. I played it through cheap earbuds. I played it with my head tilted, eyes closed, trying to catch any detail my fear might be inventing. It stayed the same every time. That was the first thing that broke me a little. A hallucination changes depending on your mood. Your memory reshapes itself. Your brain fills gaps. But this was digital, flat, repeatable. The beep did not care how badly I wanted it to be something else. My wife was still asleep upstairs. The house was waking slowly around me. The refrigerator hummed. The HVAC sighed. A neighbor started a car and backed out, tires crunching faintly on gravel. Normal sounds. And then the beep again, reproduced perfectly from my phone. I opened my laptop and did what I told myself I would not do. I searched for hotel lock sounds, not because I wanted to become obsessed, but because I needed the world to agree with me. I needed validation from something outside my own head. I typed phrases that felt insane in daylight. Keycard lock beep sound. Hotel door lock beep recording. RFID hotel lock tone. I found videos, review clips, tutorials, people demonstrating how to change batteries in a door reader, how to program staff cards, how to reset a system. The internet was full of little invisible systems, and in all those clips, the beep appeared again and again. Some were higher, some were lower, some were double beeps, some were softer. But there was a family of them, a recognizable species. I pulled up my own clip and played it, then played a hotel lock sample, then played mine again. I did it like a tired man comparing fingerprints. It matched too well. Not identical, but close enough that my skin prickled. The timbre, the confidence of it, that clean, transactional tone that belongs to a device designed to grant access. My microwave did not sound like that. My smoke detector did not sound like that. My door chime did not sound like that. I tested those devices almost angrily. I opened and closed the front door to hear the chimes beep beep. Cheap, slightly distorted. I walked past the motion sensor to hear the chirp, soft and bird-like. I opened the microwave door and pressed buttons just to hear its tones. Warmer, rounder, familiar. Nothing sounded like the clip. My anger rose in me then, sharp and hot, because if it wasn't imagination, then it was happening. And if it was happening, then someone had been close enough to my entryway at 3:17 a.m. to trigger a sound that made no sense. Someone had been close enough without triggering motion, without appearing on camera, without making the door chime go off. I found myself standing in the kitchen with my fists clenched, staring at the empty hallway like it had betrayed me. I wanted to punch something. I wanted to call the police. I wanted to drive back to that hotel and slam the clip down on the front desk and demand an explanation. I wanted the world to have a simple villain again. Then I remembered the phrase, "You have to let them in." I swallowed and forced myself to do the next practical thing, the thing I had promised would anchor me. I went to the junk drawer. My hand shook slightly as I opened it. The drawer slid out with that soft wooden rasp. Batteries, tape, menus, the sealed plastic bag lying exactly where I had placed it. The tape was intact. My marker line across the tape and onto the bag was still unbroken. No tears, no wrinkles, no sign the seal had been forced. I exhaled once, almost relieved. Then I stared at the card inside. The card was rotated, not slid slightly, not bumped by accident. Rotated, turned at an angle as if someone had spun it within the bag. The logo that had been facing up the day before now faced diagonally, and the scratched words on the back were no longer aligned the way I remembered. I froze and stared harder, trying to argue with my own eyes. Maybe the bag shifted when I opened the drawer. Maybe gravity and paper and plastic had done something subtle. Maybe the card had never been perfectly straight. So I pulled out my phone and opened the photo I had taken when I sealed it. The photo showed the card sitting flat and aligned inside the bag. The logo facing a specific direction relative to the tape roll and the batteries. My marker line was visible, the date and time printed in thick black ink. I held the phone next to the open drawer and compared. The bag was in the same spot. The tape line was still intact, but the card inside was no longer aligned. The angle was wrong. It had been turned without opening the bag. I stood there with the drawer open, the morning light too bright on the counter, and felt my anger collapse into something colder. Dread is different than fear. Fear makes you want to run or fight. Dread makes you want to sit down because it tells you your tools do not work. It tells you the rules you were relying on are not the real rules. I touched the tape anyway, pressing my thumb along the seal, looking for any weakness. It was firm. The adhesive held. The marker line was clean and continuous. No evidence of tampering. The bag was a closed system, and yet the card inside had moved. My mouth went dry. My skin felt tight on my arms. I could hear my own breathing too clearly. The refrigerator hum suddenly felt too loud, like it was trying to cover something else. The AC vent whispered, steady and indifferent. I replayed the audio clip one more time. Beep, clean, precise, confident. In my head, I watched a door open a few inches and pause, listening, and I realized why this was the worst kind of proof. Because it was proof that did not help me. It proved the thing I was trying to measure could interact with my world without leaving the kinds of marks I knew how to track. It could trigger sound without showing up on video. It could move an object without breaking a seal. It could make me right, while still keeping me powerless. I closed the junk drawer slowly, like I was trying not to wake something up. Then I stood in the kitchen, staring at my own front door, and felt a thought settle into me with slow, terrible clarity. If logic fails, then there is no safe procedure. There is only waiting. 6.3, the night he almost opens the door, 100 words. That night I did not drink. I did not take anything to sleep. I did not try to drown the house in TV noise. I did the opposite. I made everything as quiet as possible, like I was preparing to hear a confession. The dishes were done. The lights were off except for a small lamp in the living room. My wife had gone to bed early, exhausted, and I watched her disappear upstairs with a guilt I could not name. When the house finally settled into its late-night rhythm, I sat on the couch with my phone in my hand and stared at the entryway. The camera feed was open on my screen. The hallway looked pale and flat in its night mode. The front door was a dark rectangle at the end of the frame, silent and closed, as if it had never betrayed anyone. The motion sensor sat halfway down the hall, ready to chirp. The door chime waited like a cheap watchdog. I told myself I was ready, but readiness is a lie people tell themselves when they want to feel in control. Around midnight, I started to drift into that thin, uncomfortable state between wakefulness and sleep. Not because I felt safe, but because the human body cannot hold tension forever without collapsing. I remember blinking slowly. I remember my head tipping slightly, then jerking back up. I remember the faint whisper of the AC vent. I remember the refrigerator compressor clicking on and off. Then came the knock. 2 taps. Tap. Tap. Polite. Controlled. Not loud enough to scare the neighbors. Not urgent enough to justify panic. My eyes snapped open fully. For a second, I did not move. I stared at the front door like it had turned into a person. The TV was off. The house was almost silent. In the hush, those 2 taps felt enormous, like they had been delivered directly into my chest. The door chime did not beep. That was the first wrong thing. If someone was at my door, if the door moved, if anything shifted, the chime should have given me its cheap double tone. Beep, beep. It should have confirmed the physical world. Nothing happened. I held my breath and listened for footsteps on the porch. No steps, no retreat, no shuffle, nothing. The camera feed on my phone showed the entryway unchanged. The door remained closed, the hallway empty. The pale night vision image made the shadows look clean and simple. I waited for the second knock. It did not come. Instead, a voice spoke from the other side of my front door. Low, too close. Not shouting through the wood, not the muffled sound of someone standing on the porch steps calling out. It sounded like their mouth was inches from the door, like they were speaking into the gap where the frame met the wood. You have to let them in. The words were not begged, not demanded, just stated calmly, like a fact you might share in a quiet conversation. My stomach dropped so hard I felt nauseous. I clutched my phone tighter, and my thumb moved toward the screen automatically. The 911 keypad was already open, because I had been living with my finger hovering over emergency for days like a reflex. My finger hovered over the last digit. I did not press it. That is the part that shames me the most. I did not press because my brain did what it always does when something impossible happens. It tried to make it possible. It tried to find a normal explanation fast enough to avoid collapsing. Maybe it was a neighbor. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe someone was messing with me because of something I posted online. Maybe my mind was filling in a voice over the memory of the phrase. But the voice had weight. It had breath behind it. It had that slight texture of a real human throat. You have to let them in, it repeated, the same tone, the same closeness. I stood up so fast my knees hit the coffee table. Pain shot through my shin, and the sharpness of it made the moment more real, not less. My body wanted movement. My body wanted to run upstairs, wake my wife, lock us in the bedroom, call the police, and scream until someone showed up. Instead, I walked toward the door. Not quickly, slowly, like a person approaching a wild animal, careful not to trigger it. My feet made almost no sound on the carpet. The house swallowed me the way the hotel hallway had swallowed footsteps. That parallel hit me hard enough to make my skin prickle. I stopped a few feet from the door and listened. No footsteps, no shuffle, no doorbell, just the quiet breath of the house and the faint hiss of distant traffic outside. Like the world was continuing without noticing the boundary being tested. My eyes flicked to the motion sensor in the hall. It was still. My phone screen showed the camera view. Empty hallway, closed door. I raised my voice just enough to be heard, trying to force normalcy the way I had forced it at the hotel. "No," I said. My voice sounded small. "Not right now." Silence followed. Then, from the other side of the door, a soft sound like a fingertip brushing the wood. Not a knock, not a scratch, just contact. And the voice again, almost conversational. "You have to." My finger hovered over 911 again. I stared at the deadbolt. I stared at the latch. I stared at the seam where the door met the frame, imagining a thin piece of plastic sliding along metal, imagining a clean beep, imagining the door opening a few inches and pausing, listening. I realized something terrifying in that moment. I was not waiting for them to leave. I was listening for proof that they were there at all. Because nothing else was confirming it. The door chime stayed silent. The camera feed showed nothing. The house made its normal sounds, as if nothing was wrong. And yet the voice was right there, inches away, speaking a phrase that did not belong to my street, my porch, my life. A chirp sounded behind me. The motion sensor. Chirp, then again faster. Chirp, chirp. My blood went cold. Movement in the hallway. behind me. I turned my head sharply, phone still in my hand, and looked down the hall toward the bedrooms. Nothing. No person. No shadow. No shift in light. The hallway was empty, pale in the camera's night vision. The motion sensor chirped again, insistent now, like a bird warning of danger. Chirp, chirp, chirp. I spun back to the camera feed on my phone, expecting to see something moving in the frame. The camera showed an empty hallway. Perfectly empty. No flicker, no blur, no shadow. Just the same dead, clean image, as if the sensor was lying, as if the camera was blind, as if my house had begun to behave like the hotel, full of systems that were supposed to protect you, but instead disagreed with each other in the exact moments you needed them to be true. Behind me, the motion sensor chirped again. In front of me, the door remained closed. And from the other side of that door, close enough that I could almost feel breath through the wood, the voice spoke one last time, calm and patient. "You have to let them in." I stood there with my finger hovering over 911, caught between a hallway that insisted something was moving and a camera that insisted nothing was there. And in that gap, between two versions of reality, I understood what the hotel had taught me the first night. The quiet side is not a place. It is a moment when the systems stop agreeing, and the only thing left to trust is the sound at the door. 7.1. Final attempt to end it. 1,050 words. By the time I decided to destroy the keycard, I had already tried everything an ordinary adult tries before they admit they are out of tools. I had installed devices. I had recorded proof that did not help. I had argued with customer service loops and listened to a former employee say the quiet side was managed. I had stood in my own hallway with my finger hovering over 911 while my motion sensor insisted someone was moving and my camera insisted nothing existed. And still the phrase kept finding its way back to me, like a line stuck in a song you hate. So one night, after my wife finally fell asleep, I went into the kitchen and pulled the sealed bag out of the junk drawer. The tape was still intact. My marker line still unbroken. The bag still looked like evidence. The card inside looked like an insult. I set it on the counter under the warm light and stared at it for a long time, trying to feel something decisive. I wanted to feel brave. I wanted to feel angry. Mostly I felt tired. The refrigerator hummed. The AC whispered through the vents. Outside, a car passed and its tires made a soft, wet hiss on the road, fading into the dark. I grabbed a pair of scissors from the drawer. Not dramatic, not ceremonial. The same scissors we used for opening packages and cutting tape. The metal felt cold in my hand. I sliced through the plastic bag, then peeled the tape away. The sound of tape separating from plastic was loud in the quiet kitchen, a tearing sound that made my skin tighten. I slid the key card out and held it between my fingers. It was warmer than it should have been. That detail made me angry in a sudden, childish way. I squeezed it hard, as if I could crush it with my hand. The plastic did not bend much. It was stubborn. It felt like it had been designed to survive exactly this kind of desperate handling. I took the scissors and cut. The first cut was harder than I expected. The blades bit into the plastic with a gritty resistance, and the sound was ugly, more crunch than snap. I had to use both hands. The card flexed, then split with a sharp crack that made me flinch. I stared at the two halves. For a second, relief loosened my chest. Not because I believed it was over, but because the act of breaking it felt like a line drawn. It felt like doing something physical in a situation that had been all sound and suggestion and systems refusing to agree. Then I cut again. and again. I reduced it to smaller pieces, jagged rectangles that no longer looked like a keycard. I could still see parts of the hotel logo on one shard, and on another shard I could see the faint scratches that formed the fragment of that phrase. Let them in. I hated the way those words could survive even in pieces. I carried the shards to the sink and ran them under water like water could wash meaning off plastic. Then I turned off the faucet and listened to the pipes tick as they cooled. I needed it gone, not just broken. So I found an old metal coffee can in the pantry and dropped the pieces inside. They clinked against the bottom with a hard, final sound. I snapped the lid on. I wrapped tape around the lid, not because it mattered, but because the ritual mattered. Because if my brain saw layers, it could pretend the world had layers too. I wrote on the can in marker, trash. The word looked stupid and small. Still, I held the can like it was dangerous and stepped quietly out the back door. The night air was cold enough to wake me fully. The porch light buzzed faintly. The neighborhood was dark and silent in that sleeping way. A few windows lit, most not. Somewhere far away, a dog barked once and stopped. I did not go to my own trash bins. That felt too close, too domestic, too easy for the keycard to come back from. Instead, I drove. There was a gas station a few miles away, one of those places that always looks tired, even when it's open. The kind with a buzzing sign, harsh overhead lights, and a dumpster out back that smells like old soda and cardboard. The kind of place that feels public enough to be safe, but anonymous enough that no one will remember you. I drove there with the coffee can on the passenger seat. The metal rattled softly every time I hit a bump, the plastic shards inside clicking against each other like teeth. The station was bright in the dark, fluorescent lights spilling onto the pavement, turning everything flat and exposed. The big sign buzzed, one letter flickering slightly, like it couldn't decide whether it wanted to stay lit. Moths threw themselves at the light in small, frantic arcs. A couple cars were parked by the pumps. A man stood smoking near the curb, staring at nothing. Inside, I could see the clerk behind thick glass, head down over a phone, not looking up. I walked around the side of the building toward the dumpster. The back lot was uglier, quieter. The light did not reach as well back there, and the shadows felt heavier because of it. The dumpster sat against a brick wall under a single harsh security light that cast a bright circle and left the corners black. The smell hit me immediately. Old grease, spilled beer, damp cardboard. I stopped at the edge of the light and looked around. I don't know what I expected. A person, a shape, a camera pointed right at me. Some sign that the hotel had followed me all the way here like a joke. There was nothing. Just the faint roar of traffic on the main road. The distant beep of a truck backing up somewhere far away. The buzzing of the station sign. A thin electric whine that made my teeth feel tight. I walked up to the dumpster and lifted the lid. The metal lid screeched loudly on its hinge, a terrible sound that made me flinch again. The noise echoed off the wall and died quickly. For a moment I stood with the lid half raised, listening for footsteps. None. I threw the coffee can in. It hit the pile of trash with a dull thud, then rolled slightly and settled. I watched it disappear among black bags and cardboard like it was sinking into something dirty and final. I lowered the lid carefully this time, trying not to let it slam. The hinge squeaked anyway. The sound felt like the building taking note of my effort. I stood there under the harsh light, breathing cold air, and waited for some immediate consequence. Nothing happened. No beep, no voice, no phrase. I walked back to my car feeling foolish and strangely lighter, like I had taken a heavy object out of my life and placed it somewhere the world could chew it up. On the drive home, the radio stayed off. The cabin was quiet except for the tires on pavement and the occasional wind noise through the door seals. I realized my shoulders had dropped slightly. I realized my jaw wasn't clenched. At home, I came in quietly, locked the door, checked it once, only once, and went upstairs. I slept for a few hours that felt almost normal. For 1 hour the next morning, I believed it might be over. Sunlight filled the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed with its usual steady confidence. The house sounded like a house again. My wife moved around with sleepy annoyance, making coffee, opening cabinets, talking about nothing. I stood in the doorway and felt that rare, fragile thing, relief without dread attached to it. Then I saw the kitchen table. In the center of it, centered with a neatness that felt deliberate, was a hotel keycard, intact, not in pieces, not warped, not half-melted, not taped or sealed, clean and whole, lying flat like a place setting. The logo faced up. The edges looked uncut. The plastic looked faintly warm, as if it had been held in someone's hand just moments before. I stopped breathing without meaning to. My wife was talking from the counter, saying something about running out of creamer, and her voice sounded far away. I stared at the card and felt the cold understanding settle into me, slow and exact. Destroying it had not ended anything. It had only proved that the thing I was fighting did not obey the rules of objects. It obeyed the rules of access. 7.2. The house learns the hotel's silence, 1 through 50 words. I did not pick the card up right away. That is what I remember most clearly, and it still embarrasses me. The card lay in the center of my kitchen table like a dare, and I stood there in the doorway, like a man who had forgotten how objects worked. My mind kept trying to loop back to the simplest question, how? And every time it reached the end of that thought, it hit a blank wall and slid off. My wife moved around the kitchen for a few minutes, half awake, clinking a spoon against a mug, opening the fridge, shutting it again. She said something about creamer. She asked if I had slept okay. I answered with a noise that passed for agreement. I watched her leave the room. I watched her go upstairs. I listened to her footsteps fade. I waited until the house belonged to me again. Then I sat down at the table. The chair legs made a small scrape on the floor, and the sound felt too loud, like I was disturbing something that had been placed there carefully. The card was still centered in front of me, perfectly aligned with the table edge. The hotel logo stared up, bright and clean, like an advertisement. The refrigerator hummed, steady for a moment. The AC vent whispered. Outside, a car passed on the street, and the sound of tires on pavement drifted through the window like a thin ribbon. Somewhere farther away, a dog barked once. A neighbor's garage door groaned open and then shut. Normal life. I stared at the key card until my eyes felt dry. My hands were on the table, palms down, as if I was anchoring myself. The card looked harmless. It was just plastic, the kind of thing you throw away without thinking. But I could feel the weight of it anyway. I could feel what it had done to me. How it had turned my ears into traps and my home into a hallway. I tried to breathe slowly. I tried to make my body stop vibrating with that leftover morning adrenaline. Then the soundscape began to thin. It was subtle at first, a gentle quieting that could have been coincidence. The kind of shift that happens when the neighborhood settles, when traffic lightens, when the day pauses between one wave of noise and the next. The refrigerator hum softened. The AC's whisper eased down. The outside noise grew fainter, as if someone had turned a dial. I lifted my head slightly, listening harder. The refrigerator compressor was in the middle of its cycle. I could hear it, low and steady, a familiar bass note that had been part of my life for years. And then, mid-hum, it stopped. Not with a normal click and fade. It stopped like someone cut the sound off. The sudden absence of it made the air feel empty. My ears rang slightly, as if my body didn't know what to do without the background noise. The AC paused too. The vent whisper vanished. For a moment, the house was so quiet that I could hear a tiny settling tick somewhere in the wall, and then nothing after it. No follow-up creak, no pipe noise, just stillness. Outside, the neighborhood seemed to drop a layer of sound. No car hiss, no distant lawnmower, no dog bark. Even the faint wind noise at the window felt like it had been pressed down. And in that new quiet, too clean, too complete, I heard my own blood. That is not poetry, that is not exaggeration. I could hear it in my ears, a soft, rushing pulse, louder than any appliance. I could hear the tiny swallow in my throat when I tried to wet my mouth. I could hear the fabric of my shirt shift when my chest expanded with a shallow breath. The silence did not feel peaceful. It felt engineered. It felt like the hotel hallway at midnight. The mechanical hush that arrived like a held breath. A gap where the normal world stopped moving for just long enough to make room for something else. I stared at the keycard and felt my stomach turn cold. Because the card had not just come back, it had brought the quiet with it. The worst part of the hotel night had never been the figure at the foot of the bed. It had never been the grab at my collar, the weak grip, the intent. Those were frightening, but they were also clear. They were events. The worst part had been the second before, when the door opened a few inches and paused, when the lock beep did not match my swipe timing, when the building went quiet in a way that felt wrong. That moment before contact. That moment when everything holds its breath and you realize you are being measured. Sitting at my own kitchen table with my own house suddenly quiet in the same unnatural way, I understood something I had been refusing to name. The knock was not the signal. The silence was. The stillness was the warning that something was about to happen, and my body had begun to respond to it like a trained animal responds to a bell. Heart rate up, breath held, muscles ready, ears open. I looked down at my hands and saw that my fingers were curled slightly against the table like claws. That realization made me feel sick, not because it was supernatural, but because it was psychological. Because it meant the thing I feared did not need to break my door down. It did not need to show itself on camera. It did not even need to speak. It only needed to teach my body a pattern. Silence, beep, knock, or silence, and the anticipation of the beep. I could not tell anymore if the house was doing it to me, or if my brain was doing it to my house. I could not tell if I was being stalked by a person with access, by a system that had leaked into my life, or by the echo of one night that had carved a groove into my mind. But the card was there, whole, centered, and the silence was real enough to make my ears hurt. I sat at the table and stared at the key card while the world held its breath around me, and I realized the scariest part was not what might happen next. The scariest part was that I was waiting for it like I had been taught to wait. 7.3, cold ending. The door that was not touched, 1,100 words. I do not know how long the silence lasted. Time behaves differently when the world stops making its normal noise. Minutes can feel like a held breath. Seconds can feel like a decision you cannot take back. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the keycard in front of me, and I kept waiting for the house to restart. Fridge hum, AC whisper, a car passing outside. Anything that would prove the silence was just a coincidence. Nothing returned. The quiet stayed thick, clean, and wrong. In that stillness, I heard 2 taps on the front door. Tap, tap, polite again, controlled, the same rhythm that had started all of this. The taps were not loud enough to wake the neighborhood. They were not urgent. They were not angry. They were the kind of knock designed to make you come closer. My body tried to stand on its own. My hands pressed against the edge of the table and my chair creaked slightly, as if it wanted to push me forward. I felt the old instinct rise. The instinct to check, to verify, to look through the peephole, to make sense of it with my eyes. I did not move. I stayed seated, staring at the wood grain of the table, staring at the keycard, listening. No footsteps followed, no shuffle on the porch, no voice through the door. Just the quiet, heavy and deliberate, like the house itself was listening with me. My phone sat face down near my elbow. I could have flipped it over. I could have opened the camera feed. I could have watched the entryway through a screen like I had done so many times before. I did not. Screens had stopped comforting me. Proof had stopped helping. Every time I checked a camera and saw nothing, it only made the sound feel more powerful. So I sat there and chose ignorance as a kind of defense. If I did not look, I could not be tricked by what I saw. If I did not look, I could not be convinced to step closer. My eyes drifted toward the hallway anyway, not to the peephole, not to the door, but to the shape of my own house. The corridor that led to the bedrooms. The corner that the camera could not see unless it adjusted. The doorway that held shadow even in daylight. The silence made those shadows feel deeper. I swallowed. The sound in my throat was loud. I heard my own breathing, shallow and careful, like I was trying not to alert something. Then the keycard on the table shifted. Not a slide, not a fall, not the soft movement of paper on wood. A tiny, dry scrape, as if the plastic had been nudged exactly half an inch. I froze, staring at it. My stomach tightened with the same cold dread I had felt in the hotel room when the lamp clicked on and the shape became a person. This time there was no person. Just the card. Just the quiet. Just the front door waiting in the other room like a mouth. I kept my hands where they were. I kept my eyes down. I tried to breathe slowly, to stay inside my body. Tap, tap. The knock came again, identical, as if someone outside was repeating the instruction. Still no footsteps, still no voice. I told myself over and over, do not open, do not check, do not go close. I had learned the pattern. I had learned that the moment before the knock was the real signal. I had learned that curiosity was not bravery, it was a lever, so I refused to give anything. Minutes passed, or seconds, or some amount of time my nervous system could not measure. Then I heard a sound that did not belong to the porch, a single beep. Clean, perfect, confident. The hotel lock sound. My muscles clenched automatically. My head snapped up, eyes wide, ears straining for the direction. The beep did not come from the door as a whole. It came from the lock, from the exact spot where the deadbolt sat in the frame, a precise electronic confirmation tone, like a card had just been accepted. A soft click followed, not the loud mechanical clack of a deadbolt turning. A smaller click, subtle, like a latch resetting. I stood so fast my chair scraped across the floor, and the noise sounded like a shout in the silent house. My legs felt weak under me. I walked toward the entryway without choosing to, drawn by the same animal urgency that makes you look at the thing that might kill you. Halfway down the hallway, I stopped, because I realized something that made the hairs on my arms rise. I had not heard footsteps outside. I had not heard anyone approach. The beep had sounded too clean, too close, too contained. It did not sound like a keycard reader responding from the outside of the door. It sounded like the interior side of the lock had made the decision, like the house itself had accepted a card. I stood in the hallway staring at my own front door, my breath held, my heart hammering so hard it felt like it was rattling the bones in my chest. The door did not swing open. It did not even move. It simply sat there, perfectly still, as if it was waiting for me to touch it, to test it, to confirm what I feared. I refused. I did not step closer. I did not reach for the handle. I did not look through the peephole. I stared only at the lock, at the metal plate, at the seam between wood and frame. Silence pressed down again, thicker than before, as if the beep had been the only sound the house was willing to give me. And then, from somewhere deeper inside the home, not from the hallway, not from the door, not from outside, came a whisper. It was not loud enough to be a normal voice. It was not close enough to be breath against wood. It sounded like it was coming from a room I could not see from where I stood, from behind a corner, from inside the walls, from the quiet itself. You let them in. The words were soft and final, spoken the way you state a result after an experiment. I did not move. I did not speak. I stood there facing my own front door while the house held its breath around me. And the last thing I understood, cold, exact, impossible, was that the knock had never been asking permission. It had been reminding me what the house had already learned to do. Epilogue. What I do in hotels now, 2,300 words. I still travel for work. That is the part people assume changes. Like a man has one night in a hotel and then swears off hotels forever. Life does not work that way. Bills keep coming. Schedules keep moving. Employers keep booking rooms. You keep driving down highways under the same dull lights, pulling into the same kinds of lots, walking into the same kinds of lobbies with the same detergent smell and the same burnt coffee. The difference is that I do not enter a hotel the way I used to. I used to check in like a normal person. Tired, distracted, grateful for a bed. I used to accept whatever room they gave me because a room was a room and a lock was a lock. And I assumed the world was mostly held together by functional systems. Now I check in like someone who has learned that procedure is not the same as safety. I ask for a room near the lobby, not because I like noise, but because noise means witnesses. Noise means it is harder for the building to create that clean hush without someone noticing. If they offer me a room mid-hall on a quiet side, I say no. I do not apologize. I do not explain. I just say no again. The way you say no to an upgrade you do not want. If the clerk smiles too easily, if they repeat a phrase like it is a promise, quiet side, peaceful wing, away from the elevator. I feel my stomach tighten. I watch their eyes when they say it. I watch whether they look at the security monitor when I ask about locks. I watch whether they write anything down. I watch whether the smile stays in place when I mention master keys. I never used to think about master keys. Now that word sits in my mouth like metal. When I get to a room, I do not step fully inside right away. I stand in the doorway for a second and listen to the sound of the room before I bring my bags in. The mini fridge vibration, the AC breath, the distant muffled footsteps under carpet. The ice machine clattering somewhere down the hall like a sudden laugh. The ice machine is the worst because it sounds innocent. It sounds like convenience. It sounds like a little perk. But to me, it sounds like the moment in the hotel when I first realized the building could make noise on its own and still hide a person. It sounds like a cover sound. It sounds like the hotel reminding itself it can be loud in one place and quiet in another. So I listen to it like a warning. I lock the door the moment it shuts behind me. Deadbolt, latch, any extra swing bar. I check it twice. Not because I cannot remember, but because the second check is where my body starts to believe it. If the deadbolt feels loose, if the latch does not seat cleanly, if the door has any give when I push it, I do not negotiate with myself. I go back to the desk. I used to worry about being annoying. I do not care anymore. I carry a cheap door wedge in my bag now. I slide it under the door when I sleep, not because it is impenetrable, but because it makes a sound if anything shifts. I place my suitcase against the door, not because it would stop someone, but because it would force friction and noise. I build little barricades that would look ridiculous in a daytime photo. At night, I keep the TV on low, not because I want to watch, but because I want a human voice in the room, something that keeps the silence from becoming clean. I keep a lamp on sometimes, because darkness is where imagination grows teeth, and because I do not trust myself anymore to wake up and interpret a shape correctly. I never sleep deeply in hotels now. I sleep like an animal. Light, broken, ears open. I wake to elevator dings. I wake to hallway footsteps. I wake to distant laughter. I wake to the soft clatter of the ice machine dumping its load and then settling back into its wet hiss. And every time the world goes quiet for even a fraction too long, when the AC pauses, when the fridge cycle stops mid-hum, when the hallway seems to hold its breath, I feel my chest tighten automatically because my body expects the next sound. The beep. People like to ask, when I tell them this much, why I did not report it publicly. They imagine there must be a forum post, a review, a thread, some official complaint. They imagine the story would become a warning label pinned to the hotel like a notice. But the truth is, I could never find a way to describe it without sounding insane. I could report unauthorized entry and missing master key and staff misconduct. That part sounded normal. That part sounded like something a manager could apologize for with corporate language. But what about the key card on my kitchen table? What about the beep that came from the interior side of my own lock? What about the silence that seemed to spread? Hotel to home, home to hotel, like it had learned the shape of my life? You can report a break-in. You can report a theft. You can report a suspicious person. You cannot report a pattern that behaves like a system, not without becoming the story people tell as a joke. So I kept it private. I told my wife pieces of it, softened and edited, the way you tell someone you love something frightening without giving them your exact fear. I told a couple friends in vague terms. Most of them responded the way people respond when they want to be supportive, but do not want to fully believe you. That is why I am sending this to a horror channel instead of the police. Because a story like this needs somewhere to exist, even if it exists as entertainment to strangers. Even if someone listens to it while folding laundry or driving home late at night and thinks, "That's creepy," and then forgets it. At least it exists outside my head. At least the pattern has a name in someone else's mouth. Months passed after the night the beep came from inside my lock. Life smoothed itself over the fear the way life always does. Bills, work, errands, small arguments, small moments of peace. The house never felt fully safe again, but it began to feel familiar again, like a wound that has scarred over. I started traveling again because my job demanded it, and for a while nothing happened. No key cards appeared, no phrases whispered from corners, no clean hush that made my ears ring. I began to think, dangerously, that maybe I had starved it. Maybe I had broken something by refusing to open the door. Maybe whatever it was had moved on. Then, on a business trip in a town I had never visited, I checked into a hotel I did not recognize. Mid-range chain off a highway, the kind of place that smells like detergent and carpet glue. The lobby TV played muted news. The coffee station sat under bright lights. The security monitor perched behind the desk like a prop. I did my usual rituals. I asked for a room near the lobby. I checked the latch. I wedged the door. I listened to the ice machine like a warning. I went to bed tired and half believing that my routines had made me safe. Sometime after midnight, I woke up because the hallway outside my room had gone too quiet. The AC in my room paused. The mini fridge vibration softened. The building's normal breath thinned, and my body responded before my mind could argue. I sat up in the dark, heart pounding, listening. Then I heard it. A single clean beep. Not from my door, not from my floor. It came from somewhere down the hallway and slightly above, as if a door on another level had accepted a card. The sound was soft and precise, traveling through the building like a small, bright point. And as I lay there in a room that was not my home, staring at a ceiling that was not mine, I understood the part that still makes my stomach turn when I think about it. The beep was not tied to one hotel. It was not tied to one house. It was tied to me, to the routes I take, to the places I rest, to the moments when the world goes quiet enough for a lock to speak. I did not get up to look through the peephole. I did not open the door. I lay still in the dark and listened to the building hold its breath, waiting for the next sound. Because now I knew the scariest part is not what happens when someone knocks. It is realizing the sound can find you anywhere you sleep.